What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in Bleach as the Strongest Shinigami? Part 3. If you enjoy this type of content, please get Suga Tensho the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Remember to check out the original story linked in the description. Without further ado, let's get into the legend of the strongest Shinigami. Shino Academy. Principal's office. An elderly division member stood respectfully before the desk, his hair mostly gray with one side still black, as he delivered his mission report. The rebel unrest has spread beyond noble power struggles. These extremists have infiltrated the Rukongai, the Godei 13, and the Kido Corps. 2nd Division Intelligence confirms that lieutenant-level Shinigami are now in contact with the rebels. Though we lack concrete evidence, my years of experience suggest this rebellion may be connected to one of the captains. After the report, 1st Division's 3rd Seat Chojiro Sasakai maintained his respectful bow, awaiting the elder's response. Sasakai, you've done excellent work. Genryusai Yamamoto declared, not only did you suppress the rebels, but you've gathered vital intelligence. With this information, we can work toward completely eliminating these rebels who threaten Seoul society. He paused briefly before changing the subject. Now that your mission is complete, you should return to your position as principal. I've identified several promising talents at Shino Academy and adjusted their training programs accordingly. Pay particular attention to Sojin Kachiki and Akira Kisaragi. Chojiro's face creased with confusion. Sojin Kachiki is the Kachiki family heir, raised with noble education. He already possessed seated officer capabilities before entering the academy, excelling in all areas: Zanjutsu, Hakuda, Ho-Ho, and Kido. Few nobles can match his talent. As for this Akira Kisaragi, isn't he just a new student? I remember Genryusai cut him off. During your absence, this boy has caused quite a stir at the academy. He surpasses not only his peers, but even some instructors. Keep a close eye on him. With his talent, he may graduate from Shino Academy very soon, and, should he perform well, we might consider him for the Onmitsukido. It would be unfortunate to lose such a genius to other noble houses. Chojiro nodded respectfully, noting these words. While he might question the elder's methods, he never doubted his eye for talent. This was clear from Shunsui Kairaku and Jushiro Yukitake alone, not to mention the other Shinigami captains he had trained. After Genryusai's departure, Chojiro had his subordinates gather all information about Akira Kisaragi and began studying it carefully. As he read through the reports, his usually stern expression cycled through a spectrum of emotions: red, blue, yellow, white, purple, like a living kaleidoscope. After a long while, he finally recovered from his shock and muttered to himself. Beating up teachers, blowing up the men's dormitory, inventing self-destructing shikaho. How did Shino Academy end up with such a troublemaker? Another Kido class at the training grounds. Tessai stood with his arms crossed, staring intently at the two young men before him, Akira and Aizen. Today's lesson will cover practical Kido combat, he announced in his deep voice, frowning. If your injuries haven't fully healed, I can authorize you to sit this one out. Akira waved his hands enthusiastically. No problem, Tessai-sensei. I might not be good at much else, but I heal fast. And with Captain Anohana's Kaido, I'm practically good as new. Just tell me, who are we going to fight first? Tessai's face darkened like coals springing to life. Safety comes first, combat second. Both parties will stand within designated Kido barriers and engage in Kido exchanges. The first to break through their opponent's defensive barrier wins. Since you and Aizen are always together, you must be familiar with each other's abilities. Why don't we start with you two? Akira's eyes widened at these words. Tessai-sensei, how can you make such baseless accusations? When have I ever become familiar with Sosuke's abilities? He was always straightforward, and since entering the academy, Aizen had rarely engaged in combat. The few times he participated in practical combat classes, his performance had been decidedly mediocre. His only notable moment had been that one time he'd tricked Akira. To others, Aizen appeared to be merely the troublemaker priest's follower, an ordinary student with good theoretical knowledge, but average in other aspects. But in Akira's understanding, this guy's current abilities were beyond comprehension. His talent for instantly creating Kido patterns was no less impressive than his trait, Heart of a God. Perhaps even more terrifying. With such talent, plus the fact that Aizen was naturally an overachiever, his level of power was obvious. To be honest, even if this guy pulled out Kurohitsuji, Heido number 90, right now, Akira wouldn't be surprised at all. He'd just die peacefully. Tasai's mouth twitched. He had thought the two had fallen out over the self-destructing Shikaho incident. But it turned out this kid just wasn't familiar with Aizen's abilities. To be fair, even geniuses had their limits at this stage. Under his supervision, there was no need to worry about them hurting each other. He just needed to make sure someone didn't try another self-destructing spell. It's fine, Tessai said seriously after gathering his thoughts. As long as you don't act recklessly, nothing will go wrong with me here. All right, Tessai-sensei. Akira rubbed his hands together, his expression growing even more excited. With your word, I can rest easy. Come on, Sosuke. It's time to show you what a real spellcaster looks like. Looking at this student who seemed to be buzzing with energy, Tessai suddenly felt a twinge of regret. Had he made a mistake? At this point, it was too late to change his mind. While he was still pondering, the two had already taken their positions in the prepared Kido barriers. The massive oval-shaped barrier covered most of the training ground. After setting up defensive barriers for both of them, Tessai retreated to the edge of the Kido barrier, ready to intervene and stop the practice battle at any moment. Looking at the excited Akira across from him, Aizen's lips curved slightly upward as he spoke softly. Though it might be somewhat inappropriate right now, since this is your wish, I might as well indulge you. Akira grinned confidently. Don't underestimate me, Sosuke. I'm really strong now. 2 days had passed since escaping from the coordinated relief station. While others still recovered from their injuries, Akira had already returned to normal. This swift recovery wasn't just due to Aizen choosing the highest grade treatment plan for him. That's why he paid so much before. It also stemmed from the changes in his spiritual body. After all, even with Captain Anohana's superb medical skills and Kaido, severe internal and external burns would typically require a lengthy recovery period. Yet once his treatment finished, he could move freely. 2 days of rest had restored him completely. As Aizen put it, the carefree ones always heal the fastest. During this time, Akira had familiarized himself with the enhanced effects of his newly inscribed Shikaho Kido pattern. First, his Ryatsu had increased by 1 level, reaching level 53, rank 11 spirit class, a ridiculous pace of growth. After all, Shinigami were long-lived beings, and except for a few monsters, increasing one's Ryatsu was typically a gradual process. Then there was the added high-temperature property. Though the Shikaho Kido pattern inscription remained incomplete, his spiritual body quality hadn't improved. Still, these changes were extraordinary. Though his Ryatsu remained at the seated officer level, Akira felt confident he could hold his own against certain vice-captain level opponents for a few moves, perhaps even land the first strike. So, let's see who the invincible head priest's opponent is. Oh, it's the even more invincible Sosuke Aizen. Never mind then. Might as well go to sleep. At Tessai's command, the Kido combat practice officially began. Akira had no intention of holding back, nor did he grasp the concept of being low-key. Since he was already famous at the Shino Academy, he might as well be flamboyant. Heido number 31, Shikaho Red Fire Cannon. He opened with the very same spell that had backfired on him 2 days ago. The scorching flames condensed into a massive fireball, igniting the air instantly. With a crimson eruption, deep rumbling filled the space as waves of searing heat spread out, forming visible ripples that surged forward violently. Tessai drew in a sharp breath of hot air, feeling the scorching sensation in his lungs. He couldn't believe that this same person who had blown himself up could now release such a perfect Shikaho. The spell was flawless in every aspect: power, release speed, everything. Even if he were to cast this Heido himself, it would only be marginally more powerful. So, how did this kid manage to self-destruct? He wondered, could it be some kind of unspeakable special habit? The fireball charged forward, carrying violent heat waves straight toward Aizen, its intense temperature distorting the surrounding air. Faced with this level of attack, He stood calmly in place, as unperturbed as still water, the very picture of composure. Bakudo number 21, Sekianton Red Smoke Escape. His calm voice rang out at the perfect moment as crimson smoke erupted from beneath his feet, enveloping his position. When the Shikaho entered the smoke, its force remained undiminished, sending waves of heat skyward. Is it over? A student asked, stunned. From their perspective, Akira's Hado had been flawless. Had they been in Aizen's place, they would have been reduced to ashes instantly. Bakudo number 4, Hana with crawling rope. The calm voice emerged from the red smoke, and a near-invisible light rope, like a striking viper, shot forth, crossing dozens of meters in an instant. Akira spotted the attack and instinctively used Shuinpa to retreat, but his danger instincts flared. His steps halted abruptly as his peripheral vision caught a brilliant flash of lightning to his right rear. Did you notice? Aizen stepped from the smoke, his footfalls matching the rhythm of heartbeats, radiating an indescribable pressure. Hado number 4, Byakurai Pale Lightning. Though only the 4th Hado, its perfect timing and angle made it deadly. With Aizen's Ryatsu, even Byakurai could shatter Akira's defensive barrier. He dodged again. His trait, light as a feather, enhanced his Shuinpa, letting him maneuver deftly within the confined space to evade the attacks. Bakudo number 9, Gekib Strike. Aizen pressed harder, knowing his friend's capabilities well. This level of attack wouldn't be enough for victory. Sure enough, after dodging another red light rope, Akira planted his feet and smiled. So Suke, that's just like you. But you haven't grasped the true essence of being a mage. Let me demonstrate, so watch and learn. As the shocked crowd looked on, he prepared to unleash everything. Disintegrate, you black dog of Rondinini. Look upon yourself with horror, and then claw out your own throat. Bakudo number 9, Gekib Strike. Crimson light burst from his fingertips, surging forward in a devastating wave. And this was merely the beginning. Entangle, collapse, shatter, sever. Hado number 11, Tsuzuri Raiden Bound Lightning. Right once, burn to ash, slit and hang. Hado number 14, Tetsukiri Ha Iron Cutting Blade. Inferno and Pandemonium. The sea barrier surges. March on to the south. Hado number 31, Shikaho Red Fire Cannon. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws. Hado number 33, Sokatsui Blue Fire Crash Down. Incantation after incantation flooded the entire Kido barrier without pause. The Ryatsu, woven from both Hado and Bakudo, surged through the space like waves, enveloping everything from floor to ceiling. Brilliant light erupted at full force, cracking through the air like iron whips and producing sharp, piercing whistles. The continuous rumbling that followed resonated like ancient oaths within the barrier, accompanied by endless rolling thunder. Empowered by the trait Kido Mastery, Akira became a living spell machine gun, unleashing Bakudo and Hado without restraint. Every Kido technique ever taught or mentioned at the academy manifested within the barrier in rapid succession. On this day, the students witnessed the true meaning of AoE, area of effect. In contrast, Aizen remained modest and elegant. He eschewed flashy incantations and grand displays of Hado light. Instead, he seized opportunities within the brilliant chaos, using perfectly timed Shuinpa to launch precise Bakudo and Hado that nullified attacks during the brief intervals between flashes. Where the priest demonstrated mastery of AoE attacks, Aizen exemplified the art of precision strike. Elegant. So elegant. This is a born master of Kido. Tasai's eyes sparkled as if admiring an incomparably beautiful work of art. In his years teaching at the Shino Academy, he had seen countless geniuses. Those with exceptional talent for Kido, those born with immense Ryatsu, those who progressed at incredible speeds. But there were few beings like Aizen. His observation of the battlefield was meticulous. Each Kido attack and defense perfectly executed. His Ryatsu output was precisely controlled. Any less would lack power, any more would be wasteful. Combined with his nearly perfect Shuinpa positioning, Aizen walked casually through the thundering explosions, showing no sign of pressure. Looking at his overall performance in this Kido combat, he had achieved perfection. Even if Tessai personally entered the battle at the same Ryatsu level, he couldn't perform better than Aizen. If he had to find any fault, it would be that his Ryatsu was too weak, merely average among the elite first class. What a pity, such a pity. If only such a genius could be a bit stronger in Ryatsu, he would truly have no flaws. Behind his narrow lenses, Tesai's eyes revealed a look of regret. However, when he turned his attention to the other person, his mouth twitched involuntarily, and his eye corner spasmed. In stark contrast to Aizen, Akira completely threw away all his previous teachings, showing no concept of Ryatsu conservation as he went all out with pure firepower. Amid maniacal laughter mixed with Kido incantations, the barrier erupted in an unprecedented, brilliant spectacle. Silver lightning surged violently, darting about like ghosts. Crimson flames mixed with yellow ones, continuously exploding with deafening roars. Howling gusts of wind erupted in crossfire, forming wave after wave under the continuous thunder, spreading like rippling waves. Watching the endless barrage of Heido and Bakudo, a hint of helplessness flashed in Aizen's eyes. Having often spent time with Akira, he thought he understood the limits of this guy's Ryatsu and strength. But only after entering actual combat did he realize how terribly wrong his previous assumptions were. This priest couldn't be judged by appearances at all. Though his Ryatsu seemed only at seated officer level, his actual output was no weaker than a typical Shinigami lieutenant. Moreover, his combat performance was extraordinary, no bizarre. It defied all common sense. Not only was his Kido incredibly powerful, but the sheer volume was staggering. Even though he used only low-level arts, they sent chills down one's spine. He had planned to use this opportunity to humble Akira, to show him there were greater powers in the world, hoping to teach him to be modest like himself. But at this rate, after just a few more rounds of this Kido barrage, he would be forced to withdraw. Haha, Sosuke, have you grasped my mage's soul? Akira laughed wildly. A weakling like you could never understand the true essence of a mage. Try my newly developed Heido. He clasped his hands together, and crimson smoke erupted at his feet, instantly filling the Kido barrier and engulfing everything in sight. The area of coverage was so vast that Aizen couldn't dodge. He could only watch helplessly as the red smoke swallowed him whole. After the spectator's view was completely obscured, an unexpected scene unfolded. Like countless birds releasing piercing cries, dazzling white light erupted within the smoke. Brilliant lightning crisscrossed into a web, submerging the barrier. This was the fruit of Aizen's research, the ultimate fusion brought by Kido pattern inscriptions. Using just the Ryatsu of a single Sekienten, red smoke escape, it could unleash devastating Heido damage over a vast area. Author's note: for those who were confused, he also inscribed the pattern of Bakudo number 21, Sekienten, on his spiritual body, making his Ryatsu gain this property at his command. Tesai stared at the rapidly spreading smoke, confusion flashing in his eyes. But before he could stop the combat practice, crackling electric arcs had already reached him. Wait! When he realized what it was, his heart skipped a beat, his already narrow pupils contracting to pinpoints. The next moment, brilliant light ascended to its peak within the Kido barrier. The students in the training ground witnessed how a sun was formed. Heido hashtag. Akashirai red cloud of white lightning boom. In an instant, turbulent thunder resounded like a lightning storm cloud compressed to its limit, releasing endless white lightning. Like a plow turning soil, white lightning materialized within the crimson brew, bursting forth from the haze, covering and swallowing the entire barrier, leaving countless scorched marks on the solid floor. The students gaped at the unfamiliar scene before them. They couldn't understand the composition of this Kido, why this guy's Sekienten contained such intense lightning streams. Slash! A ripping sound rang out as the electric arcs tore open a gap in the outermost Kido barrier. Perhaps the power of a single lightning was ordinary, but when countless bolts accumulated together and were connected by a medium, its destructive power underwent a qualitative change. Aizen stared in shock as the defensive barrier left by Tesai dissolved at maximum speed. This development was something he hadn't anticipated. He had expected Akira to either release higher-level Kido or break the combat rules by engaging in close combat to demonstrate his so-called mage's soul. Break his skull. He never imagined this man had already mastered the fusion of inscribed Kido patterns and could demonstrate such reality-defying performance. Akira, truly worthy of you. Aizen's lips curved slightly upward as he released a fraction of his hidden Ryatsu, deflecting the white lightning arcs that swarmed like birds when the defensive barrier shattered. The red smoke and white lightning then erupted violently, burning away all Ryatsu in their path and shattering the outer Kido barrier. An overwhelming pressure instantly blanketed the entire training ground. As the red smoke cleared, 3 figures became visible on the broken, scorched floor. Akira stood unscathed, appearing exactly as he had at the start. While Aizen had avoided serious injury, his defensive barrier lay in ruins, clearly marking the outcome of their Kido combat. Tensai, overconfident in his abilities, had foregone any protection and bore the full brunt of the lightning. From head to toe, he looked as though he'd been struck by a thunderbolt. There he stood, a towering pillar of charcoal, wisps of black smoke still puffing from his mouth. The Kido combat practice had claimed its sole victim, burning down the training grounds, beating up teachers. Uroi Keiru chewed anxiously on his blood pressure medication, specially prescribed by Urahana, while glaring at the youth before him with bulging eyes. "Tell me, is there anything you wouldn't dare to do?" Hearing this, Akira pondered for a moment before responding seriously. "I haven't kissed the school beauty yet." At these words, Uruoi's vision darkened and his blood pressure skyrocketed, leaving him gasping for air. Fortunately, Urahana's custom blood pressure medication, though expensive, proved extremely effective and quickly stabilized his condition. "This time you're getting a major demerit," Uroi declared, having barely recovered. He waved his hand decisively, issuing the severe disciplinary action. "One more incident like this, and you can forget about graduating from the Shino Academy." Akira took the disciplinary notice and examined the list of rule violations. "Wait a minute. Why is last Saturday's central dining hall theft attributed to me?" he protested, although he used to occasionally feast at the central dining hall. Since inheriting the Asashiro family fortune, he hadn't done anything so undignified. These days, when dining at the cafeteria, he simply orders double portions. "Don't ask why. When you're wealthy, you can do as you please." Uruoi's expression froze. He furrowed his brow and said, "Wasn't it you? That day the central dining hall lost nearly 3 days' worth of meat. And in my experience, you're the only one who could eat that much." Akira was outraged. Did this teacher think he was some kind of bottomless pit? Even if he and Aizen ate together, they couldn't finish 3 days' worth of meat. "Whatever. What's one more offense?" Uroi waved his hand wearily. "Let's leave it at that. I'm sure you have other unreported violations anyway. So consider this making up for those." With those words, he promptly began shooing him out. Just seeing this kid now gave him a headache. It was becoming almost Pavlovian. Author's note, referring to Pavlov's classical conditioning, where a stimulus automatically triggers a learned response. In this case, the mere sight of the MC immediately causing the old man to experience a headache. How had he not noticed during enrollment that this kid could be such a troublemaker? Akira trudged back to his dorm with the disciplinary notice, feeling dejected. He never imagined that his casual conversation with Aizen would become a self-fulfilling prophecy, sealing his academic fate. Even if Uroi wanted to help him after more violations, it would likely be impossible. After all, Genryusai's strict impartiality was legendary throughout the Shino Academy. Students facing expulsion for rule violations, like Akira, were exceptionally rare. He hadn't meant to cause trouble. Everything had been accidental. Who could have predicted that the future Grand Kido chief would end up singed by a student's Hado? Though thinking about it now, he felt a hint of pride. Before even joining a division, he had managed to take down a captain-level fighter. What might he achieve in 2 years? Fortunately, his ego remained in check. Tensai had taken the full blast without defending himself, and had only suffered minor injuries. The power gap between them remained crystal clear. "Got to work harder," he muttered to himself. "But first, let's check today's reward." 3 seconds later, Akira hurled a book to the ground, shouting, "Great one-eyed god above. What am I supposed to do with a cookbook? Make some damn Chinese dishes or something." Looking at the cookbook on the ground, he hesitated before picking it up again, though it seemed worthless to him. Someone else might find it useful. 3 minutes later, "Sosuke!" He burst excitedly into the dorm room. "Look what I brought you." "A cookbook." Aizen paused, puzzled by his friend's latest antics. "That's right," Akira announced proudly. "I found this in the Asashiro family collection. It has all kinds of delicious recipes. And just the tofu dishes alone number. Well, there are lots anyway." He recalled that his peculiar friend had a fondness for tofu dishes. Sure enough, Aizen took the cookbook and began examining it with interest. "Tell me something. Is this great magic panda tofu really from the Azashiro collection? Author's note: this is probably a pun to a type of Chinese art food, as well as a dish from a Chinese anime called Chuka Ichiban. Akira's expression froze as cold sweat trickled down his forehead. The damned cookbook actually contained damn Chinese recipes. Well, yes, the name is strange, he said with a forced laugh, but the Azashiro family is an ancient noble house. It's only natural they'd collect unusual items. Study it well, I'll leave you to it. Before Aizen could respond, Akira had vanished from the room. Watching his friend's retreating figure, the smile faded from Aizen's face as his brows furrowed, and barely audible murmurs filled the empty room. A coincidence? Or has he noticed something? He had been exceptionally careful lately, moving in ways that even captain-level beings would struggle to track. With Akira's current Ryatsu and detection abilities, he shouldn't be able to. Suddenly, a faint light flickered in Aizen's eyes, as if he'd realized something significant. That strange intuitive instinct of his again. I'll need to be even more careful. His gaze drifted to the cookbook on the table, and after a moment's contemplation, the corners of his mouth curved upward, though perhaps this could serve as a convenient excuse. After fleeing the dorm, Akira wandered around the Shino Academy, debating whether to bring eggs as a peace offering to Tessai. After all, he was his Kido teacher and had been injured because of his actions. I hoped Sakabashi-sensei likes eggs. Making sure no one was around, he materialized 3 boxes of premium eggs from thin air. These eggs, among his check-in rewards, were undoubtedly top-tier quality, perfect for visiting friends and family, travel, or arson and murder. When Akira arrived at the infirmary with the eggs and was about to push open the door, he overheard voices from inside. Is that Akira guy's Kido talent really that ridiculous? More than that, his self-created Heido, red cloud of white lightning, has even impacted the existing Kido system. Akira recognized Tessai's voice and, driven by curiosity, pressed himself against the door to eavesdrop. The perfect fusion of Heido number 4, Byakurai, and Bakudo number 21, Sekienten, created a new Kido that's not only incredibly powerful, but has a terrifying range. When it comes to Kido talent, I'm no match for him. Akira nodded in agreement with this assessment. However, just as he waited to hear more, the room suddenly went completely silent. Even the sound of breathing became imperceptible. His heart skipped a beat. Before he could react, the tightly closed door yanked open. And in his surprise, Akira's body pitched forward, his entire face plunging into something soft. Is it soft? A teasing yet familiar voice came from the room. Akira raised his head slowly and reluctantly from the sweet-smelling softness that had nearly enveloped him, with surprise and a hint of regret. His desire to shout incredibly, "Now let me stay here a bit longer," almost consumed his soul. A white captain's Haori, a gentle smile tinged with mischief, and an immaculate, delicate face. It was Captain Unohana of the 4th Division, who had come to visit Tessai. The teasing voice, however, hadn't come from her, but from someone else. Looking at the dark-skinned girl who suddenly appeared before him, he remembered how she had nearly twisted his arm off, and couldn't help but grumble inwardly. What's she doing here? The girl gave a crafty smile, revealing a sharp, bright fang, and said without hesitation, "That's what you're thinking, right?" Akira grimaced without admitting it, glancing aside to avoid eye contact. Unfortunately, he ended up meeting Unohana's smiling gaze instead. She didn't seem to mind his rudeness, merely smiling gently. Though our encounter was somewhat inappropriate, Kisaragi-kun and I seemed to have quite a connection. How about considering joining 4th Division after graduation? As she finished speaking, an inexplicable bone-chilling sensation crept in, her upturned lips resembling a blood-stained curved blade, giving one a hair-raising sense of dread. Hiss! Sensing the malice from the gentle woman before him, Akira regretted not staying pressed against that softness longer. Those few seconds had cost him his future. Quite a losing deal. At his current worth, he should have stayed for at least half a day. Or a month, a year would be better. And it should have been without clothes. Well, these things can't be forced. His eye twitched as he explained. Just now, Keiru Sensei gave me a major demerit. Graduation itself is still up in the air. The dark-skinned girl beside him nodded matter-of-factly from time to time. That's right. Young man, you mustn't let feminine charms cloud your judgment. Captain Unohana may be beautiful, but her suitors could line up from the Hakudaman to the Shoryumen. With your small frame, you'd hardly be able to compete with them. Author's note. This essentially means there's a line stretching from east to west waiting for her. The names of all Siriidii gates will be explained at the end. At this point, she changed her tone, her golden eyes glinting craftily as she continued. Why not join my second division instead? You'd start as a seated officer, with the potential to advance to lieutenant. Most importantly, my division has lots of young, pretty girls. With your power and position, then just a few little tricks, hee. Akira listened to Yoruchi's blueprint for his future, finding himself involuntarily drawn in, his dazed eyes seeming to envision the wonderful future ahead. But he quickly came to his senses and turned away disdainfully. How could I, Akira, be such a shallow person? You underestimate me. At his words, both women's faces showed surprise, and even Tessai, wrapped up like a dumpling behind them, looked on admiringly. Who would have thought that beneath this priest's frivolous exterior lay such a firm and resolute heart? They had truly underestimated him. Yoruchi pondered for a moment. Despite priding herself on her ability to read people, this Akira fellow might as well have had lecherous written on his face. A normal person would have instinctively jumped back in that earlier situation. This guy not only showed no sign of avoiding it, but seemed quite reluctant to leave, which said enough about his character. Well then, Yoruchi stroked her delicate chin thoughtfully. How about I introduce you to a couple of girls? I remember there's this girl who just joined the executive militia, Suafing or something. Petite and cute, with quite the looks. Before she could finish, Akira's eyes curved like hooks and his lips curled upward. As expected of you. What an eye for people. Just tell me the time and place. I'll definitely be there on time. Yoruchi's expression froze, momentarily unable to follow his train of thought. Even Unohana beside her was taken aback. As for Tessai, he silently withdrew his previous assessment of this guy. After bantering for a while, both women tacitly agreed to drop the topic. After all, even if the Shino Academy had early graduation provisions, Akira still needed to complete all this semester's courses. A qualified Shinigami needed not only to meet strength requirements, but also pass theoretical knowledge. Otherwise, his only future path would be 11th Division. As for who could recruit him into their division after graduation, that would depend on their own abilities. Seemingly thinking of this simultaneously, Yoruchi and Unohana exchanged knowing glances, sparks practically flying between their eyes. By the way, Kisaragi-kun, why did you come today? The conversation finally returned to track, and under Tessai's curious gaze, Akira took out 3 boxes of premium eggs he had brought. The big man looked surprised, not expecting this unreliable student to show such thoughtfulness. Indeed, this female-obsessed priest is fundamentally good. Just a bit lecherous, that's all. Thank you for your kindness. As Tessai accepted the gift, Akira's expression subtly changed. Tessai Tsukabashi's trust level has reached the threshold. Check-in condition achieved. Character check-in. Tessai Tsukabashi. Obtained Kido level +5. Kido level increased. Currently at level 28. Obtained Ryatsu level +2. Ryatsu level increased. Currently at level 55. Obtained exclusive trait. Unique insight. Unique insight. A true master always maintains an apprentice's heart. The path of Kido is endless. Kido innovation efficiency increased by 100%. His eyes lit up. To think 3 boxes of premium eggs would buy off his sensei. Talk about hitting the jackpot without even trying. Tessai noticed the young man's unusual expression but didn't comment. Given this guy's questionable moral compass, it was hard to guess what schemes were running through his mind. Since you're doing well, Tessai-sensei, I won't disturb you any longer. After expressing his concerns, Akira stood up to leave. Author's note, again, he's using the first name to seem more close now, like he did with Uroi. Unexpectedly, Tessai spoke up. Please wait a moment, Kisaragi-kun. Though it might be somewhat inappropriate, there's something I need to mention. At these words, Unohana and Yoruchi, who were exchanging glances, suddenly had a bad feeling. Actually, with your talent. He scratched his bandaged head with his right hand and said with an embarrassed smile, if you could join the Kido Corps, I could promise you treatment and status equal to a Grand Kido Chief. Also, the Kido Corps has many pretty girls too. And if you could bring Aizen-kun along, that would be even better. At these words, Both women abandoned their previous rivalry and turned to stare at Tessai lying in the hospital bed, completely astonished. Who would have thought? You straight-faced fellow. You've switched sides too. Siriidii, Court of Pure Souls, is a large city in the center of Soul Society and serves as the home of the Shinigami and the noble houses. This also includes the Shino Academy. The four great Pure Soul Gates, Shirdai Siriman, consist of four gates: the northern Black Ridge Gate, Kikuriamon, the eastern Blue Stream Gate, Shoriamon, the southern Red Hollow Gate, Showaimon, and the western White Way Gate, Hakutamon. Executive Militia, or K-Gun, the first and highest-ranking branch of the Onmitsukito's 5 divisions. The Executive Militia specializes in combat missions. So being too talented can bring this many troubles, huh? What do you think, Sosuke? Someone lay on the bed, boasting. Should I choose 2nd Division, 4th Division, or the Kido Corps? Whether it's Yoruichi, Captain Unohana, or Tsukabshi-sensei, they've all offered such generous conditions. It's really hard to decide. Aizen remained silent, absorbed in reading through the cookbook Akira had given him. The recipes within seemed far more interesting than his companion's boasting. Oh right, I almost forgot. Akira sat up and spoke seriously. Tsukabshi-sensei mentioned you when he extended his invitation to me. He really admires your performance in practical Kido. If you join the Kido Corps, you'll be treated as a senior-seated officer right away. And once your Ryatsu level increases, you could even become Vice Kido Chief. Hearing this, Aizen stopped turning the pages, but before he could speak, the priest continued. Actually, I think Tsukabshi-sensei's judgment is off. How can anyone say your Ryatsu is relatively weak? He grinned and gestured with his fingers. If my Ryatsu level is this much, then yours must be about this much. Under Aizen's surprised gaze, Akira spread his arms wide, stretching them as far as possible, even bending them backward. You misunderstand. Aizen's eyes grew calm, masking his momentary surprise. My Ryatsu is actually far inferior to yours. Otherwise, I wouldn't have lost in the Kido practice battle. I only held out so long because I know how to utilize every bit of power efficiently. Though curious about Aizen's confidence, he wouldn't press the matter. Secrecy was his nature, after all. Fine, whatever you say. Akira couldn't be bothered to argue anymore. Aizen's Ryatsu inferior to his? What kind of Soul Society joke was that? If he had used his full Ryatsu in their previous Kido battle, he'd probably have been on his knees begging for mercy within 10 seconds. While not quite at captain level, it was definitely above lieutenant level. Akira was confident about at least this much. It's lunchtime. He flipped over energetically and pulled Aizen along. Rather than worrying about which division to join later, let's fill our stomachs first. Today's expenses are still on the handsome me. Glancing at the excited priest, a hint of helplessness flickered in Aizen's eyes. He was now somewhat confused. Was becoming friends with this guy a good thing or a bad thing? Peace and tranquility returned to the Shino Academy in the days that followed. After a brief rest, Tessai resumed his teaching at the Kido training grounds. He announced that this would be his final academic year at the academy, as his upcoming role as Grand Kido Chief would leave him little time for such leisurely pursuits. And also, under Yuruoi's stern threats, Akira had temporarily curbed his troublesome behavior. He scaled back his entrepreneurial ventures, selling talismans, performing exorcisms, and offering blessings at the academy, and pledged to cease all physical intimidation of the teaching staff. Yet this restraint seemed unlikely to last. For someone of Akira's temperament, suppressing his true nature would inevitably lead to more dramatic consequences. Fortunately, after attending to his duties, Yuruoi shifted his focus to him and developed a targeted plan of action. In the teacher's office, Yuruoi looked at the two young men before him with a dark expression, or more precisely, stared intently at Akira. Ahem, Yuru-sensei, I haven't caused any trouble lately. He defended himself quietly. Yuruoi nodded silently and grabbed some blood pressure medication from his desk, swallowing several pills. By now, he could take medicine without so much as flinching. Though next time, he thought, he might ask Unohana to make some mint-flavored ones. As long as this kid remained at the academy, he'd need blood pressure medication daily. I called you here because there's a new mission. It was meant for the 6th-year students, but considering there might be situations beyond their capabilities, I asked the principal to put you in charge. He cleared his throat and continued seriously. The 8th and 12th divisions are intelligence gatherers, Recently discovered hollow traces in the 32nd district of East Rukongai. Your mission is to eliminate any hollows there and maintain stability. Seeing Akira's expression change, Yuroi quickly picked up his pace, worried that this reckless fellow might dash off immediately. Before you go, you must visit the 12th Division's Research Institute to collect their newly developed hollow detection equipment. These hollows are particularly adept at concealment. After explaining the remaining details, he dismissed them, watching their retreating figures and hearing their muffled conversation fade down the corridor. Yuroi felt an inexplicable unease in his heart. Surely that Akira kid wouldn't cause any trouble, right? 12th Division Barracks, connected to the Shinigami Research and Development Institute. Two young men of similar height, wearing identical blue and white Shino Academy uniforms, arrived at the entrance. The building before them was a bizarre sight. Several massive bone-like arms wrapped around cocoon-shaped structures, sprawling across the stone-paved ground like some grotesque Michelin Man. Colorful, brilliant banners adorned the Research Institute, giving it the appearance of an elaborate dying house. As expected, scientists have quite twisted aesthetics, Akira remarked after surveying the scene. Aizen made no comment, though he too found the institute's appearance rather peculiar. After presenting their credentials, a Shinigami officer led them through winding corridors to a room marked Laboratory 7. Chief, they're here for the latest hollow group circuit device. The room was stark white, devoid of decoration, a striking contrast to the building's flamboyant exterior. The sound of wheels broke the silence as a beautiful woman in a pristine white research coat appeared. Her medium-length black hair fell in smooth waves, her features delicate and refined. Her pale skin and graceful movements seemed at odds with the typical researcher's demeanor. Under Akira's startled gaze, she approached them slowly, her flawless black eyes fixed on Aizen as she said softly, "Young man, you're special? What happened?" Akira's heart raced. Had they discovered Aizen's special nature? Had they seen through the evil lurking within this boy? Was he about to be cast into the depths of hell? And who was this beautiful lady? However, the elegant lady's gaze shifted to Akira. "It seems you're quite special too. Let me introduce myself. I am Senjimaru Shutera, head of the 12th Division Research Group." The lady carried herself with grace, her every gesture and smile radiating nobility, quite unlike what one would expect from a researcher. Upon hearing her introduction, Akira's shock deepened. Though his memories were hazy, certain images remained vivid in his mind. That woman. Wait, the elaborate golden hair ornaments, the Zero Division's exclusive white haori, those golden skeletal arms. It all matched perfectly with the image in his memory. After staring at the lady for nearly a minute, he furrowed his brow. "Young man, your gaze is quite impolite. Is something amiss with my appearance today?" Senjimaru smiled, her words carrying a hint of reproach but no real blame. "I just think you look better now," Akira answered honestly, noting that without the elaborate golden ornaments, she seemed more approachable. Of course, this was only relative. If he remembered correctly, this elegant lady would soon join the Zero Division. Even if she wasn't currently the captain of the 12th Division, her status was equal to any captain's. "You're quite the smooth talker, young man. It's a pity I'll be leaving the Seriidii soon. Otherwise, inviting you to join the 12th Division would have been a nice option. No matter how many other compliments may fail, sincere praise never misses its mark. No woman can resist it, especially when there's no ill intent behind it." Senjimaru took a brick-shaped object from the metal counter beside her, silver white in color and solid in texture. "This is the hollow circuit detector, used to track the Ryatsu of hollows that have infiltrated Soul Society. Its use is simple. Inject Ryatsu to activate it within the hollow's range of activity, and it will automatically locate groups of hollows." Well then, this meeting is concluded. One moment they were chatting pleasantly, the next she was dismissing them. A classic case of, "Thanks for coming, now bye-bye. Mayuri, see our guests out." At her words, a figure emerged from the adjacent laboratory, grumbling and cursing. His face, covered in white paint, showed clear anger and dissatisfaction toward his superior. "Damn it, couldn't you just tell them to get lost? They're disturbing me with such trivial matters when my experiment is at a crucial stage." Akira curiously observed the man before him. With his blue pompadour hairstyle, white painted face, eye patch mask, and ears enclosed in yellow hollow cones, he barely looked human. Though different from the weird Shinigami in his memory, His demeanor and appearance already showed glimpses of his future self. He had thought Kasuke Urahara was Mayuri's senior, but surprisingly, this strange man had been conducting research in the 12th Division even before Kasuke became captain. No wonder he resented him. Anyone would be upset having a junior promoted above them. Seeing the young man standing there lost in thought, Mayuri frowned, his eyes showing a trace of pity. This kid must be an idiot, right? Let's go, brat, he said irritably. How much longer are you planning to stay here? Get out quickly. You're disturbing my research. At his urging, the two took the hollow circuit detector and left the research facility. As they walked along the road to the 32nd district, Akira glanced around to ensure they were alone before whispering. So Suke, do you think Shutara called you special because she foresaw your betrayal of Soul Society and your descent into evil? Aizen gave him a cool glance and replied calmly, she said the same about you. Perhaps you're destined to walk the same path as me. Akira frowned at this, making a tisk-tisk sound. But he suddenly stopped his brain, looking at recent signs. It seemed this possibility couldn't be ruled out. Could it be? Maybe I should try being a big shot too? Lost in these troubling thoughts, he continued toward the Rukongai until they reached their destination. 32nd District, East Rukongai. Life had returned to normal since the civilian massacre incident. The streets bustled with activity, filled with people going about their daily routines. Akira and Aizen blended seamlessly into the crowd. In one of the foremost districts, where Shinigami officers regularly patrolled, 2 Shino Academy students hardly drew a second glance. The target was last seen in the outskirts. Aizen said gravely, "We should spot it after passing through the last street." Akira took out the brick-shaped hollow circuit detector and injected his Ryatsu. Within moments, red grid lines materialized on its silver surface, displaying a green dot for himself and 2 red dots marking the hollows. He grinned. This detector works beautifully. Look, it's found them both. Perfect. 1 hollow for each of us. Aizen merely glanced at the device before heading westward, following its guidance. Since arriving in this district, an unsettling feeling had crept over him. Something lurked on the horizon, something beyond his control. The sensation of fate slipping through his fingers was truly dreadful. At the outskirts, they found themselves before a dark, deep cave. They must be hiding in here. Aizen studied the cave entrance, confirming their location. Let's wrap this up and get back for dinner. Though Akira smiled, he wasn't reckless enough to charge straight in. Instead, he extended his right hand, pointing it toward the cave. Bakudo number 21. Sekianton red smoke escape. In an instant, massive amounts of crimson smoke erupted from his palm, billowing into the deep darkness. Hado hashtag. Akashirai red cloud of white lightning through the smoke, crackling electrical arcs danced and leaped, filling the air with piercing screams. Then a single spark ignited. Boom! A deep rumble shook the mountain as intense flames erupted, sending shockwaves through the air with deafening roars. The inferno burst from the narrow cave entrance, scattering into countless droplets of liquid fire that painted the sky in a spectacular display. After intense Kido combat practice with Aizen and days of developing his spiritual body, Akira had completely mastered Byakurai's properties. He could now enchant basic attacks, sword strikes, and martial arts with its power. In simple terms, his attacks now carried lightning effects. When he deployed Sekianton, it was no longer just a Bakudo. It possessed extremely powerful destructive force. The combination of dust and electric arcs produced devastating results. Its power far exceeded a Hado of the same level, rivaling even a full-power Shikaho. The red smoke's extensive coverage area could amplify its effectiveness up to 120% in certain locations. Now, an explosive rain of fire radiated scorching heat through the mountain, reaching into its deepest darkness. Crimson light burst from the cave entrance, brilliantly incinerating the nearby forest. Soon, howls of intense pain echoed from within the mountain. 2 massive beings, several meters tall and wrapped in fierce flames, rushed out from the firelight, their high temperature igniting the surrounding forest. Akira watched excitedly as the giant hollows tried to extinguish the flames on their bodies by rolling around. Their structure resembled spiders, but with centipede-like limbs along their bodies. A perfect combination of the most horrifying aspects of both insects. The sight alone could trigger an instant breakdown in anyone with entomophobia. "You take left, I take right?" he asked, glancing sideways. To his surprise, Aizen shook his head, frowning. If you like, you can handle them all yourself. Just finish quickly, don't waste too much time. Hearing this, Akira was slightly puzzled and about to ask. But then Aizen explained, if you miss dinner time, you'll have to raid the academy cafeteria again tonight. With finals approaching, better avoid trouble. Akira was deeply moved. Truly worthy of being the kind Sosuke, always thinking of his friend's well-being. Meeting Aizen was definitely one of his best decisions ever. Since you put it that way. He rolled up his sleeves and drew his asachi from its sheath, its silver gleam flickering amidst the flames. Then let's end this quickly. Reiko Shuinpug lightning flash steps, electric arcs exploded beneath his feet, leaving behind intense heat as Akira vanished. Noticing this, a hint of surprise flashed in Aizen's eyes. Had he mastered Byakurai's properties so quickly? As expected, outside of theoretical courses, this youth's talent rivaled anyone's, including Aizen's own. Looking at the lightning-wielding youth who materialized before it, the giant hollow's fierce pupils filled with terror. What manner of being was this? Since when did Shinigami wield electricity? With no time to think further, a sharp pressure bore down. Ryatsu enveloped them, crushing in its oppression. Driven by instinct, the two spider hollows ignored their burning flesh as their charred limbs struck forward in a killing motion. The sound of tearing air approached. Akira bent and stepped forward, his body coiled tight like a drawn bowstring. A powerful roar burst forth as his blade fell. Tenrin Reikup celestial lightning arc. Ryatsu cascaded upward in endless waves, the sword light brilliant as thunderclouds crashing down. In an instant, the metallic limbs shattered, red viscous liquid spraying from the broken parts onto the scorched earth. The limbs continued their relentless assault. For spider hollows with hundreds of limbs, losing a few meant nothing. They needed only one strike to end this battle. In their experience, while Shinigami were powerful, their defense was poor. Without sufficient Ryatsu support, even a lower-level hollow like a Jillian could wound a captain. But after just a few exchanges, the two giant spider hollows realized with shock that not only were their attacks ineffective, but each contact with the youth's asachi left their bodies increasingly numb and paralyzed. The effect is quite good, Akira mused, casually severing incoming limbs. Byakurai's power had its limits. Even against ordinary hollows, paralyzing their bodies took time. However, this was merely the beginning. He looked forward to discovering his true strength after inscribing those high-level Kido. Sosuke, you must not disappoint my expectations. Our ascent to the pinnacle depends entirely on your efforts. After testing Byakurai's properties, Akira prepared to end this one-sided battle. Shuinpa flashed steps as countless limbs struck. He burst into Shuinpa, weaving through the gaps to strike directly at the terrified head with its compound eyes. Tenrin Sogup celestial twin fang strike. Splat! Flesh tore as Akira landed atop the hollow's white shell, his asachi plunging deep into its skull. The explosion of Ryatsu pulverized everything within. Light faded from the spider hollow's compound eyes as its massive body crumpled. Seeing its companion fall, the other hollow panicked. Despite its paralyzed and burning body, it desperately tried to flee, its remaining limbs thrashing wildly. Trying to escape? Akira sprang upward, electric arcs crackling around him as he charged forward with his sword raised, his fierce visage illuminated by the lightning. After watching his friend effortlessly dominate the two giant hollows, Aizen turned his attention elsewhere. With Akira's current strength, he could easily handle hollows of this level, perhaps only struggling against those approaching Jillian class. Aizen opened his Raikaku, Ryatsu sensing, searching for the source of his growing unease. Beyond his Raikaku's range, beneath the massive tree branches, a misty Kido light enveloped several black-clothed figures. According to intelligence from Shino Academy, Akira is the strongest of those brats. Our war failed because of his protective talismans. This time, our objective is clear. Kill him by any means necessary, even if it costs us the entire team. Tenrin Senpu, Celestial Whirlwind Cut. Akira split open the spider hollow's skull with a single strike, sending red and white matter splattering across the ground, a nauseating sight. As he gathered the compound eyes to turn in, an uneasy premonition seized him, his danger instinct screaming in warning. From his blind spot, several black-clothed figures burst forth, launching a direct attack on the youth who stood atop the corpse. A dark aura shrouded the sky overhead, where the Death Star shone without cease. Author's note: Death Star is a Chinese idiom for when someone is dying. Your Death Star is shining, therefore you're close to death. Something like this. Standing atop corpses, Akira's pupils contracted as several Shinigami suddenly emerged. From their Shuanpa speed alone, he could tell they were elite-level warriors. Yet something didn't add up. Hadn't these assassins gathered proper intelligence beforehand? What fool thought mere elite Shinigami would be enough for this mission? Akira held his ground, surveying all directions as a savage smile crept across his lips. In the cruel territory of Sakahon District, mercy alone means nothing. Under Aizen's shocked gaze, the usually carefree priest underwent an earth-shattering transformation. Killing intent erupted like volcanic magma above the hollow corpses. A bone-chilling coldness intertwined with it, enveloping the attacking shadows and freezing their breath. This was nothing like the Akira who had fought Soya before. Now he seemed to have shed his outer skin, revealing his true nature. If anything, the current Shinigami with the terrifying smile above the hollows resembled Captain Unohana from that day at the Coordinated Relief Station. Author's note: he's talking about the first time he met Unohana. Aizen composed himself, the glint in his eyes fading as he watched the battlefield's center with a tranquil gaze. Blood flowers bloomed brilliantly in the air. Amid the shrill clash of metal, naked horror dawned in the assassin's eyes. The Asachi hummed, weaving intricate attack patterns at his side, clashing with the Zanpakuto. Blade lights crisscrossed into a heaven-and-earth net, encompassing everything around. Jigakukuma Wakatsu hellish cloud parting. The blade descended like an invisible hand, pushing back the attackers as brilliant light and bone-piercing cold pierced their bodies. The air trembled as blades struck true. Flesh tore in the silence, and more blood flowers bloomed, painting the battlefield in macabre beauty. Jigaku Kage Satsujin hellish shadow murder. In a single strike, the shadows crashed to the ground, their lifeless bodies splaying across the blood-slicked earth. Their eyes remained wide with disbelief. Even in death, they couldn't fathom how a mere Shino Academy student had displayed power far beyond a Shinigami officer. Terror filled Takamoto Shinya's eyes as he gripped his Zanpakuto, its tip trembling forward. He stood paralyzed with disbelief. Their supposedly foolproof assassination mission had capsized in mere moments, too swift for him to even react. Damn it, which idiot provided this intelligence? Since when did elite Shinigami have this level of power? The flaws in intelligence led to the mission's complete failure. After the initial clash, only he remained standing among the attackers. Rebels. The tip of Akira's blade drooped, a drop of blood rolling off its bright surface and merging with the viscous pool below. The other party remained silent. It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk. I'm sure the 2nd Division can pry open your mouth. Akira had no intention of interrogating. He was certain he hadn't offended anyone, except for killing that deserter Shinigami in the 32nd District. Then it hit him. He suddenly raised his eyebrow, asking with slight surprise. The Kachiki clan? Hearing this, Takamoto's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly recovered, determination flashing in his eyes. He knew well that in this situation, his opponent could kill him as easily as turning over a palm. The only reason he was still alive was so they could extract intelligence from him. As a former officer of the Godei 13, Takamoto knew the 2ND Division's methods all too well. Not even a captain could resist their interrogation techniques. Dark memories flickered through his mind, making him shudder before he fixed his gaze forward with fierce eyes. Akira walked slowly toward him, sword in hand. We shall never surrender. With these words, Takamoto suddenly raised his blade and plunged it toward his own abdomen. Slash! The blade struck true, clean and swift. He noticed anxiety flash across the distant youth's face, and satisfaction bloomed in his heart. Though I couldn't kill you, I've protected the intelligence. This mission isn't a complete failure. Akira approached the fallen man, sighing helplessly. Why do this? The mission was almost over. Now you're making me work overtime. Blood gushed from Takamoto's mouth, rendering him speechless. Hearing the youth's sigh beside his ear only strengthened his satisfaction. As long as the enemy didn't get what they wanted. Then, wait, why are you starting to take off your clothes? His eyes widened, unable to comprehend the youth's actions. He watched as Akira pulled out a set of common ceremonial robes from nowhere and brazenly changed clothes on this blood-soaked battlefield. Seeing this, Aizen sighed helplessly. Well, Akira was still Akira. as unreliable as ever. Wooden table, incense teacup, ritual wand. When the handsome and well-dressed priest finished his preparations, he noticed that Mr. Assassin hadn't yet breathed his last. Your seppuku technique needs work. If you get the chance in the future, make sure to practice diligently. Author's note: seppuku is committing suicide. MC's a menace. Jigaku kotetsu dejikid hellish steel strike. With these words, under Takamoto's dumbfounded gaze, Akira ended his vitality with a single slash. Death isn't a way to escape reality. Especially not before me, the handsome priest of Sakahon. The water in the teacup began to tremble, ripples spreading in circles before bouncing off the cup's walls. When everything finally stilled, faces full of terror and disbelief appeared within. Takamoto couldn't believe his eyes. How was he still able to see this brat after death? Had he truly died? While his confusion mounted, Akira dipped his finger into the teacup. Instantly, infinite agony erupted from the depths of Takamoto's soul, as if he were being torn into countless pieces and forcibly stitched back together. A familiar voice echoed in his ears. "Tell us everything you know, and I'll grant you a quick end." Before Takamoto could even react, his colleagues had already spilled everything like beans from a broken basket. This inhuman torture could break even the most resolute Shinigami. No soul could withstand being torn apart. After extracting intelligence from the dead, Akira frowned slightly. Something felt off. His danger instinct continued to warn him that the situation wasn't safe. His heart tightened. Were there even more powerful enemies lurking nearby? You'd better drop those dangerous thoughts from your mind. Aizen warned, this is the outskirts, not an uninhabited area. Hearing this, Akira reluctantly suppressed his ryatsu, abandoning the bold idea he had just conceived. His thought process had been simple. Since they couldn't find the source of danger, why not unleash widespread firepower? The Kido Mastery exclusive trait could reduce his Kido casting cost by 50% while doubling its power. Though his Riryoka might be insufficient, with the system boost, going all out would let him spread Sekienten, red smoke, throughout his field of vision. If he could use it, it would be a killing blow. Unfortunately, he couldn't. I've used Raikaku to scan this entire forest, Aizen calmly explained, but I haven't detected any movement. In that case, there are only 3 possibilities. Either their ryatsu far exceeds yours, or they're using some method to block my perception. Akira picked up the thread, frowning. Or, he looked toward the forest's north, where the more desolate outskirts lay with rolling hills creating interwoven patterns. The danger comes from even further away. He was certain of this last guess. Only a captain-level Shinigami could evade a lieutenant-level Raikaku, but they wouldn't deploy a captain for a small fry like him. According to the intelligence extracted from the assassin, the rebels had only deployed this one small squad. In their leader's view, sending several elite Shinigami to kill a genius still studying at the Shino Academy was already showing enough respect. Failing such a simple task seemed impossible. So the true source of danger must be something else entirely. Just as Akira was debating whether to scout further ahead, a heavy rumbling echoed through the forest, and the ground began to shake violently, as if a dragon were turning beneath the earth. The two exchanged glances, as if asking each other's thoughts. Neither showed any fear in their eyes, only intense curiosity. Though his danger instincts hadn't yet issued warnings, Akira, emboldened by Aizen's skill and his own daring nature, prepared to investigate the source of the tremors. Clearly, everyone had a considerable degree of risk-taking in their genes. Some displayed it readily, while others kept it hidden deeper. Meanwhile, at the 12th Division Barracks, Research Institute, Mayuri stood at the experiment table, his face painted stark white, his bloodshot eyes and manic expression fixed on the display before him. Confirmed, spirit wave measurement established. Wait, his eyes tracked the radar-like patterns on the massive screen. He let out a maniacal laugh that quickly gave way to a somber expression. This is a Minos Grande specific frequency? Location: 32nd District, East Rakongai, 3603. And there's a hollow circuit detector response frequency. A realization dawned on Mayuri's face, twisting it into a grin. Ah, that foolish kid. What terrible luck, encountering a Minos Grande invasion. He's done for. Another voice cut through his words. That's not necessarily true, Mayuri. The pale-skinned Senjumaru materialized before the massive screen, her delicate lips curling as she watched the pulsing red dots. You never take others seriously, do you, Senjimaro? Intruding into someone's private space. Mayuri didn't bother turning around, recognizing her voice instantly. Indeed, she was the only one who could enter his lab without triggering his alerts. That irritating, arrogant woman. Intruding is too strong a word. Senjimaru's eyes followed the dots representing the Minos Grande across the screen. I'm actually more interested in these two young men. I'm curious to see how they'll perform in this situation. Akira stared in shock at the spider-like hollow horde charging toward them from the horizon. Aren't we still in Soul Society? How can there be an entire group of hollows here, in the headquarters of the Shinigami? Aizen sighed. He couldn't understand this scene either. By his knowledge, Soul Society shouldn't harbor such a massive hollow group. From their earlier battle, these spider hollows should have been dwelling deep in the mountains or underground. The reason for such a large-scale disturbance might be because a certain someone, whose name's first letter is and the last letter is Kira, had injected a huge red cloud crackling with lightning into the mountain, triggering chain explosions that disrupted the already unstable space. Of course, there could be other reasons. So Suke, let's run. Akira's expression turned grave. With this scale of hollow group, forget about just us. Before he could finish speaking, he discovered that Aizen had already vanished from beside him. Well. Who would have thought that someone looking so honest and upright would abandon their teammates so decisively? Watching the spider hollow group approach, the ground tremors intensified. Akira didn't dare delay, following Aizen's Ryatsu in pursuit. Though he liked taking risks, faced with over 100 hollows, he wisely chose to flee. Who knew if there were any Minos Grande among them? Risk-taking wasn't the same as seeking death. The two shouldn't be confused. When Akira caught up to Aizen, he found him chanting an unfamiliar Kido incantation in a deep voice. Abrupt tower, sink, flow, pale, fall into the bottomless abyss, ignite the blazing sun, illuminate all directions. Heido number 57. Daichi Tenyob upturned earth dance. As the words fell, the ground behind them instantly split with fierce cracks, the earth surging like violent waves, piling layer upon layer toward the sky, forming two impenetrable barriers. Between the barriers lay a bottomless, uncrossable ravine. Phew, Akira gazed at the spectacular scene before him, drawing in a sharp breath. As expected of you, Sosuke. But since you're so powerful, why not turn back and kill all those hollows? At these words, Aizen gave him a look as if he were looking at an idiot. Just then, the hollow circuit detector device in his pocket began to vibrate. Akira pulled it out, but before he could inject Ryatsu to check it, a familiar voice came through. Hello, can you hear me? Akira was startled, not expecting the hollow circuit detector device to have communication capabilities. This is Shutera from the Research Institute. Our observations show that a hollow group has appeared at your location, cause unknown. However, you should note that we've detected Minos Grande Ryatsu waves within this group. Senjimaru spoke into the microphone before her with concern. Young man, try not to die before support arrives. By the one-eyed great god above, I'll definitely settle accounts with Kaoru-sensei when I get back. Akira grumbled, hanging up the phone with a throbbing headache. Half a year ago, he was a weak youth who had to run away even from ordinary hollows. Now he had to survive being hunted by both a Minos Grande and a group of hollows. Senjimaru really thought highly of him. This Heido can temporarily hold back the hollow group. Now we just need to focus on dealing with the Minos Grande, though it's unclear whether we're facing a Jillian or an Ajichas. Aizen analyzed calmly, showing no signs of panic. Could it be a Vasto Lord? Akira chimed in, immediately receiving looks that suggested he was an idiot. Whether they could survive an encounter with an Ajuchas was one thing. But if it was a Vasto Lord, they'd only need to consider which way of dying would be more dignified. As the two were conversing, the distant ground began trembling again. Ryatsu solidified and spread through cracks in all directions like ripples, causing everything in its path to shudder. Witnessing this scene, Akira exclaimed how terrifying it was. He had imagined encountering a Minos countless times, but none of those scenarios matched the current situation. Heavy pressure continuously extended from underground. The ground collapsed into huge holes as fresh soil sank in, and sharp limbs gleaming with cold light crawled out until fully revealed before the two. It was still a member of the Jillian family, but its body was several times larger than its relatives, with limbs on either side being several meters tall. When it appeared completely, Its massive body cast shadows, bringing a suffocating sense of pressure. On its pale mask, two crimson lights flickered, emanating the cruelty of an apex predator. Minos Grande, Ajuchas. Sosuke, this time. You take the lead attack. I'll support with Kido. You're stealing my line, aren't you? He seriously suspected that Aizen had secretly learned some forbidden Kido technique to read others' thoughts. Otherwise, why would he say exactly what he was thinking? Are you sure you're not joking? Akira raised his right hand, pointing at his bulging bicep. With those skinny arms and legs of mine, I might fall apart from just one hit. Aizen glanced at him and replied gravely, I still need to maintain the Daichi Tenyo, Heido, or we'll face attacks from both the Hollow Group and the Minos Grande at once. If you can guarantee. Watch me cut down this Mira Jutsus in one strike. Akira's expression hardened as he rolled up his sleeves, his Ryatsu beginning to surge. The Ajuchas fixed its gaze on the two insects before it, letting out a roar that materialized into sound waves. These waves pierced through the forest, drilling holes through thick trees as they rushed toward Akira. Countless trees swayed and fell, dust billowing amid the rumbling. Tenrin Reikup, Celestial Lightning Arc. With barely a moment to react, Akira gripped his sword with both hands, unleashing a powerful slash that struck the incoming sound waves head-on. Boom! The collision between lightning and sound waves sent invisible shockwaves in all directions, tearing cracks in the ground. TCH, so this is an Ajuchas? Akira stared at the furrows beneath his feet and his trembling hands, a wave of helplessness washing over him. He couldn't even withstand the enemy's roar. He was too weak. At this rate, would there ever be a place for him on that throne in the sky? Self-doubt gnawed at his heart. Sosuke, don't forget to support me. He forced his confidence to resurface, his fighting spirit surging as his Ryatsu fluctuated wildly. The Ajuchas' limbs began moving, charging at their position like a runaway truck. Akira let out a low roar to steel his nerves, then charged forward with his sword, ready to face death. Aizen watched his back, words caught in his throat. He wondered whether to tell the priest that the sound wave attack he'd just blocked was actually the Minos' primary attack, second in power only to the charging Zero. From Akira's reaction, he had clearly misunderstood something. Still, blocking an Ajuchas' full power attack was remarkable. With merely a seated officer's Ryatsu, he had managed this much. Perhaps he wouldn't need much help to defeat this enemy. Akira's body tensed like a tightly drawn bowstring, his powerful Ryatsu flowing continuously like rippling water. Jigaku Raijin Zan, Hellish Thunder God Slash. As he approached, Ryatsu burst from his blade in scattered arcs of lightning, cracking like thunder before a storm. Boom! Blade met limbs with a metallic clash that echoed through the forest. Akira poured every ounce of his Ryatsu into the strike. Though far weaker than the Ajuchas, his unusual spiritual body helped bridge the gap between them. Their forces locked in stalemate. Heido number 31. Shikaho Red Fire Cannon. Aizen's calm voice rang out from behind as his support arrived. A blast of scorching energy struck the Ajucha's pale mask with perfect accuracy, erupting into a torrent of flames. Boom! The pale mask, now covered in scorch marks, opened wide as the Ajuchas roared. The battle's intensity surged to new heights. To Akira's surprise, this Minos Grande wasn't as formidable as he'd imagined. Its massive body limited its mobility in close combat, making hit-and-run tactics highly effective. Despite his modest ho-ho skills, Akira's powerful spiritual body, light frame, and Byakurai traits allowed him to dart in and out of range. There was just one problem. His Ryatsu was running low. As a rank 10 spirit class holder, the realization hit him. His MP was nearly depleted. Sosuke, draw its aggro for a bit. He called without looking back. I need to charge up a big move. Though Aizen didn't fully grasp the gaming terminology, he understood the intent. He glanced at their crumbling barrier. The hollow group was approaching, and time was running out. Carriage of thunder, bridge of a spinning wheel. With light, divide this into 6. A calm, unwavering voice rose amid the deafening roars as Aizen gazed steadily ahead. Since Heido spells of equal level hadn't been enough to kill the Ajuchas, he would have to place his hopes in his unreliable friend, Bakudo number 61. Rikujikoro, 6 rods prison of light. Brilliant beams of light descended from the sky, sealing both the creature's foremost limbs and temporarily binding its grotesque head in place. As Aizen completed the incantation, he noticed an absolute darkness beginning to envelope the battlefield. With Akira at its center, black ink flowed continuously from the single-eye decoration on his white clothing, tracing an otherworldly shadow behind him, sacred yet eerily disturbing. The very erasure in the air began to distort. Author's note: terms to remember. Minos Grande or Minos are conglomerations of hundreds of normal hollows, resulting in a single composite entity of far greater strength than any normal hollow. Jillian, lowest great hollow Ajuchas. Intermediate great hollow Vasto Lord. Highest great hollow the Rikujikoro confined the Minos Grande, instantly driving it into a frenzy. It roared skyward, spewing vicious profanities from some unknown source. "I'll kill you all, tear you to pieces. I'll rip out your guts and stuff them in your ears." Mere insects. As an evolved form of Jillian, the Ajuchas possessed human-like intelligence, though its behavior remained volatile due to its accumulated rage. Akira sat cross-legged on the ground as fine shadows extended from his sacred form, branching like dark trees beneath a starlit moon. Dense Ryatsu swirled around these shadows, replenishing his depleted power until his Ryuryoku was fully restored. The ritual's power continued to strengthen him. A profound fullness permeated his soul as shadows etched intricate patterns across his body, creating an aura both eerie and powerful. A bone-chilling cold crept outward, consuming everything in its path. When the Bakudo holding the Minos Grande shattered, the earth trembled violently. Overwhelming Ryatsu surged forward like a tsunami, while looming shadows made the air thick and heavy. Crack! Crack! The Rikujikoro splintered as the Ajuchas broke free, its frenzied limbs slicing through the air with piercing whistles. Its rage had peaked. How it arrived in this world no longer mattered. It wanted only to crush these two insignificant insects and let the hollow horde feast on their remains, and then devour their souls. Electric arcs roared around Akira's body like serpentine dragons, the air crackling with heat. The ground beside him blackened and charred. Raw power surged through him. The sacrificed souls had made him stronger than ever. As he savored this sensation, the Ajuchas charged like a berserk juggernaut. Compared to the brown-haired youth beside him, this electricity-wrapped brat especially infuriated it. The monster closed in, its razor-sharp limbs whistling as they thrust downward through the thunderous air. Even at a distance, the cutting wind sent waves of dull pain through one's body. But this pain didn't frighten Akira. Instead, it awakened the ferocity in his bones. In that instant, his killing intent erupted. Jigaku Akumakiri, Hellish Demon Cutter. The sword style created by the first Kenpachi revealed its true brilliance. No complex movements or tricky trajectories, just the purest release of power. A terrifying killing move that unleashed everything. In an instant, the black limbs were dismembered. Hot, viscous liquid sprayed from the stumps, falling into the fine shadows below where it was quickly devoured. Blood splattered across Akira's face, transforming his handsome features into something fierce. Under Aizen's surprised gaze, his friend showed no sign of retreat, instead charging forward against the hollow that towered over him. The tide of battle reversed. As the distance between them shrank inch by inch, a suffocating smell of blood filled the air. The Ajuchas, stunned by this sudden outburst, hesitated for a moment and lost another limb. The intense pain stripped away what little rationality it had left, its beast-like roars shaking the entire forest. The ground beneath the Minos Grande cracked as its massive body launched forward with meteor-like speed. Its crimson eyes blazed with violence, its enormous Ryatsu crashed down, and its blood-filled mouth gaped wide, preparing a sonic attack. Seeing this, Aizen prepared to release a Bakudo to restrain it and create an opening for his friend. But surprisingly, Akira charged straight into the hollow's attack, tearing through the massive Ryatsu bearing down on him. His surface purity stripped away, revealing an unprecedented ferocity in his black pupils. His right hand raised the sword hilt as his body tensed, and his Ryatsu erupted to its peak. The blessing from the one-eyed god Mimahagi provided complete enhancement, making the blade's edge razor-sharp. Jigakasuki Hakai, Hellish Moon Destruction. An instant slash fell with unstoppable momentum, severing the descending limbs and continuing forward with undiminished force. Reiko Kasoku, Lightning Acceleration, electric arcs surged through his body, providing powerful propulsion that multiplied his speed. Speed is power. Sound waves rolled forward like a wall, visible air waves crushing down toward Akira amid the sound of tearing space. A thunderous explosion erupted. The impact scattered, throwing both figures, one large and one small, back several meters. The Ajuchas had begun to sense something was wrong. How had this Shinigami brat, whom it had been dominating earlier, suddenly become so fierce? In direct combat, it had actually been pushed back. Something was terribly wrong. The pain from its severed limbs and torn body brought the Minos Grande back to its senses, the crimson in its eyes dimming. Looking down at the figure charging to kill it, an unfamiliar fear crept into its heart. Blood trailed down his cheeks. A fierce grin split his face, sword gleaming in his right hand, electricity crackling in his left. With such a savage appearance, the Ajuchas wondered, which one of us is truly the Hollow? The Minos suddenly lost its appetite. Reiko Shuinpug lightning flashed steps. Just as it considered retreat, electric arcs exploded beneath Akira's feet, shattering the ground. The recoil launched his body forward like a cannonball, bringing him instantly before the Minos. Their eyes met. Predator and prey had reversed roles. Aizen no longer watched Akira. Once his friend had declared his charging complete, the outcome was decided. At similar Ryatsu levels, a Hollow fighting on instinct stood no chance against him. Just as he turned to face the Hollow horde, several powerful Ryatsu signatures approached from the 32nd district. The leader's presence felt particularly dense and heavy. The reinforcements had arrived. When a certain laid-back man with long yellow hair entered the battlefield, he froze at the brutal scene before him. As far as the eye could see, broken trees littered the scorched earth, trenches crisscrossed the ground, and viscous blood soaked everything, filling the air with its metallic scent. At the far end of his vision, the massive Ajuchas lay prone, its severed limbs still gushing blood. And on its back stood a figure in tattered clothes, covered in wounds, right hand wreathed in electric arcs. Then, before the shocked Shinigami reinforcements, Tenrin Raijin, celestial thunder god Palm. One strike exploded the Hollow's head. Author's note: to clarify, Reiko Shuinpa is a modified version of Shuinpa that incorporates Byakurai electricity, while Reiko Kasoku applies electricity's speed-enhancing properties to the entire body. Brain matter and blood splattered everywhere like rain. The Ajuchas collapsed lifelessly, its mangled limbs creating a metallic clash against the ground, kicking up clouds of dust. Akira wiped his brain-covered fist on the creature's hard steel skin, breathing heavily. If I hadn't taken off my clothes, I wouldn't have beaten it. His appearance was ghastly, ceremonial clothes in tatters, wounds of various sizes still bleeding, making him look as if he'd bathed in blood or crawled from a mass grave. Despite his comprehensive ritual enhancements, there remained a significant gap between him and this Minos Grande. When their life-or-death battle began, the Ajuchas' survival instinct peaked, unleashing unprecedented potential. It forced Akira to use every trick in his arsenal, even managing to knock away his Asachi. Left with no choice but to fight bare-chested, he threw punch after punch until he finally broke through the Minos' steel skin, extinguishing its last spark of life. Akira hadn't emerged unscathed. He'd sustained significant injuries during the battle. Against an Ajuchas-class Hollow, he'd needed every technique at his disposal. Sacrificial power, abnormal spiritual body, Byakurai effects, traits, Aizen support. He'd employed everything he could. For his current Ryatsu level, this victory was remarkable. Typically, even a mere Jillian required a lieutenant-level Shinigami, or at least someone who had achieved Shirkai. The Shino Academy textbooks even claimed that Hollows required the Royal Guard, the Zero Division, to handle them. Yet here he was, less than half a year into his schooling, without even knowing his Zanpakuto's name, let alone achieving Shirkai. Through his various enhancements, he'd managed to defeat the Ajuchas through sheer force. Standing atop its skull, Akira watched the approaching Ryatsu. Upon seeing the leader's attire, he curled his lip in disdain. The victim, no, the perpetrator, has already reported to Mimahagi, and you show up now? Here for cleanup duty? Author's note: he's talking about the little fellow below his foot who had to take a chat with God. The approaching leader wore a white captain's haori over a black Shinigami uniform, his flowing yellow hair creating what would have been a killer silhouette, if only he weren't a man. Shinji Hirako stood opposite, observing the scene with unprecedented shock. After receiving Mayuri's communication through Tentikura, Bakuto number 77, he'd rushed here immediately, worried he'd arrived too late for anything but corpse collection. Despite his haste, that's exactly what had happened, though not quite as expected. The hollow lay dead, and the youth lived. Most terrifying was the figure atop the hollow's head, covered in blood, with wounds of various sizes exposing raw flesh, presenting a truly gruesome sight. But that gaze, as their eyes met, Shinji's heart inexplicably tightened. The killing intent still hung heavy in the air, like a blade pressed against his heart. The 5th Division members behind him grew increasingly tense. Even without releasing any Ryatsu, the youth standing atop the corpse radiated an overwhelming psychological pressure. They had witnessed countless hollow slayings before, but never had they seen, or even heard of, a Shinigami killing a hollow with bare hands. The Shinigami huddled behind their captain, eyes wide with fear, as if the youth might turn his fists on them next. When his gaze fell upon them, they shuddered in unison, every pore in their bodies seeming to open at once, as if an icy chill was seeping into their very flesh. Their fear deepened with each passing moment. Akira, showing no interest in the group, confirmed the Ajichas was truly dead before leaping down from its towering corpse. Then, he began searching through the battlefield debris. Curious gazes followed his movements, with even Shinji's face showing bewilderment. Just as he was about to offer help, the youth shouted, "Sosuke, help me find my Zanpakuto." After searching fruitlessly, Akira had to abandon his hopes of making a cool exit, sheathing his sword and walking away dramatically. Watching him rummage through the corpses, Aizen sighed helplessly. Though he'd become a formidable warrior, his unreliability hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown worse. Despite all the battle accounts in textbooks and countless library volumes, no record existed of a Shinigami abandoning their Zanpakuto during battle. Even the most reckless 11th Division members wouldn't dare. Where the sword is, there the Shinigami shall be. This was their lifelong creed. The teacher's exact words in the first Jinzen, sword meditation class. Ah, right, this guy never attended theory classes. That explained it. Still, abandoning one's Zanpakuto was unthinkable. Hey, found it. With help from several Shinigami, Akira cheerfully retrieved his Zanpakuto from among the broken limbs, wiped it clean, and smoothly sheathed it. Just as Shinji stepped forward to inquire about the details, the barrier behind them suddenly collapsed. A massive swarm of hollows poured through, surging toward them like a flood. The countless interweaving limbs produced an endless clicking sound that sent chills down their spines. For a moment, everyone instinctively looked at Akira. "Why are you looking at me? You're not expecting me to keep fighting, are you?" He angrily raised his blood-covered right arm. "I'm wounded." Shinji glanced at the fist that had killed Uejuchas and heaved a heavy sigh. His instincts told him this kid wasn't ordinary trouble. If possible, he'd rather not deal with him. "Defensive formation, protect the 2 academy students," he ordered, his expression turning serious as he faced the hollow swarm. "I'll handle these dregs who've invaded the Soul Society." With those words, he used Shuinpa to charge alone into the flood-like hollow swarm. In an instant, the white silhouette was swallowed by the torrent. The next moment, thick, heavy Ryatsu exploded from within the flood, a massive pillar of light shooting straight into the sky. Akira watched the spectacular scene, his eyes full of envy. "Sosuke, if I had this level of Ryatsu, how many cleanup crew members could I take on?" Akira's combat abilities were unknown. However, Aizen knew that whenever a hollow appeared, even one an ordinary academy student could handle, Akira would instantly collapse and beg him for help. What others would find mortifying had become routine for this priest. When did it all begin? Aizen pondered deeply. As captain of the rescue division, Shinji could effortlessly slaughter hollows without even releasing his Zanpakuto. In his wake, he left only corpses. Some of the Jillian Minos didn't even leave remains, instead dissolving directly into Reishur amid the light and flames of Kido, becoming one with Soul Society. In terms of efficiency, he far outmatched Akira. Soon, Shinji had eliminated 99% of the Jillian/Hollow group that had invaded Soul Society. At someone's request, he specifically spared 2 Bloodcube survivors, sealing them with Bakuto for later transfer to the 12th Division's research facility. After handling the Hollow group, he stationed 2 5th Division members to guard Akira and the others while he led the remaining forces to investigate the Hollow's source. These mysterious Hollow appearances in Rukongai demanded investigation to prevent future catastrophes. Akira, drained by the ritual enhancement, collapsed after the battle, his face as pale as a dried fish. The side effects had hit him hard. His wounds bled heavily, and his Ryatsu had plummeted so low he seemed near death. Just a fatal wound. He gritted his teeth and looked at Aizen. So Suke, I think I can still be saved, could you? Aizen sighed, realizing he'd overestimated this man. Even without enemies present, he'd still plead for help. Simply, utterly shameless. Kaido light bloomed in his palm, gentle Ryatsu enveloping the wound to stimulate healing. Though he maintained a low profile at Shino Academy, Aizen ranked among the most gifted students in practical applications. Even using just division officer-level Ryatsu, he could stabilize Akira's grave injuries. One of the division guards also produced emergency medical supplies and roughly bandaged the wounds. Soon enough, color returned to Akira's face, and his spirit lifted. He then took over his own healing. To the amazement of the two Shinigami division members, he performed an imperfect Kaido technique. The ghastly wounds healed visibly, with results far superior to their own attempts. Witnessing this, both officers stared at their hands, questioning everything they knew. How could the same healing technique yield such drastically different results? Out of Riryoku, Akira groaned after healing halfway. Better return to Captain Unohana. Her fees may be steep, but her service is unmatched. These words left the two Shinigami even more confused. Would Captain Unohana really personally treat injuries of this level? What's this kid talking about? Fees and service. Is this something we can get with money? They felt the 4th Division must be giving preferential treatment. Could the difference between people really be this vast? While Akira was recovering his spiritual pressure, Shinji returned with his squad. We've done a preliminary investigation, but experts will need to examine the specific details, he said, looking gravely at the two. It seems spatial fluctuations inside the mountain, combined with an unknown powerful Kido, created a Garganta. This led to the Minos invasion of Soul Society. Author's note: Garganta is the space between the 3 worlds of Bleach, which Trough Hollows tend to use to escape Hueco Mundo and invade the human world or Soul Society. At these words, Akira broke into a cold sweat, holding his breath. Aizen glanced at him discreetly, but remained silent. As Shinji noted, this was merely his assessment based on the current situation. The true cause would need expert investigation. If a single Shuinpa from Akira could tear Soul Society's space and create a Garganta large enough for Minos to pass through, he would be the first to question it. It wasn't impossible, just highly improbable. The odds were about the same as this priest defeating Genryosai with one punch and becoming Captain Commander of the Godii 13. Most of Soul Society's spatial fabric was stable, with only a few fragile nodes scattered about. These nodes typically existed in the lower-ranked Rukongai districts. Places like the 32nd district rarely had such spatial vulnerabilities. You and you. Shinji pointed to 3 people. Stay here to guard the scene until the 2nd Division and research facility personnel arrive. The rest of you, return to Siriidii with me. Before departing, he checked Akira's injuries specifically, and finding nothing serious, felt reassured. Strangely, this man's unusual behavior hadn't caught much of his attention. Instead, it was Aizen, playing his minor role on the sidelines, who gave Shinji an odd feeling. It was as if a hazy mist surrounded him, making him utterly inscrutable. Yet looking again at his seemingly carefree demeanor and transparent expressions, he appeared neither worth attention nor suspicion. Was it just my imagination? Shinji withdrew his gaze from Aizen with a slight frown. How could 2 people with such opposite personalities get along so well? Strange indeed. Everyone departed from the ravaged outskirts towards Siriidii. Shortly after their departure, 2 blurry Kido lights flickered across the barren ground. The 3 Shinigami standing guard noticed nothing unusual, continuing their watch with bored expressions. Under the 5th Division's escort, everyone returned safely to Siriidii. Shinji headed directly to the 1st Division to report. The appearance of Minos in Soul Society was a grave matter. Without Akira's intervention, that Ajuchas might have devoured the entire 32nd district. Meanwhile, Aizen returned to Shino Academy to file his report. Such a major incident required a proper explanation from the academy. Left to his own devices, Akira made his way to the 4th Division's coordinated relief station like it was his second home. He moved with practiced efficiency. Check in, pay fees, lie down. all in one fluid motion, his familiarity with the routine almost pitiful. As his awareness returned, he noticed someone occupying the adjacent bed. Well, if it isn't the unfortunate one. Long time no see. Sojin Kachiki. When Sojin first saw Akira, he felt both surprised and delighted. But as soon as the fellow opened his mouth, he instantly lost any desire to continue the conversation. Fortunately, thanks to his well-bred manners and kind nature cultivated since childhood, he didn't take offense at the way he was addressed. With a sigh, he glanced sideways and asked curiously, "What's happening with you? Has studying at the Shino Academy become so dangerous?" Akira nodded repeatedly, clearly eager to voice his grievances, and began describing the harsh treatment he'd received from Principal Chojiro Sasakaibe and teacher Yuroi. Getting a demerit was bad enough, but they announced it to the entire academy. And that wasn't all. They even blamed me for Tsukabshi-sensei's oversight. Worse still, Keiru-sensei accused me of the academy cafeteria theft. Is that how a reasonable person acts? And now I'm lying here because of Keiru-sensei's assignment. To eliminate some black chicken hollow in the 32nd district of East Rukongai. Akira let out a long sigh and gestured with his hands. I killed 2 of them, then a whole group appeared. And if that wasn't enough, an Ajucha's class Minos showed up. Sojin was shocked. As someone accomplished in both literary and martial arts, he knew his fundamentals well. Though Ajucha's class Minos weren't quite as terrifying as textbooks claimed, they still required a lieutenant-level Shinigami to handle them. The stronger ones could only be defeated by captains. That this young man could escape such a powerful enemy with only minor injuries proved his exceptional talent. A genius seen once in 100 years in Soul Society. Later, with Sosuke's support, this genius here displayed incredible power, defeating the Ajuchas with just 3 punches. Shocking everyone. Akira's tone grew excited as he detailed his remarkable feat, but Sojin could barely listen anymore. His expression went blank, his gaze distant, his mind stuck on the words, defeated the Ajuchas with 3 punches. What did this guy think an Ajuchas was? A mere blade of grass. It wasn't that he doubted Akira's words. They were simply so extraordinary that they seemed disconnected from reality. An academy student killing an Ajuchas. It would be outrageous in any era. After all, though he rarely attended classes at the Shino Academy, Sojin was technically a student himself. He gazed dazedly at his bandage-wrapped hands, remembering the day he fought against the rebels. Several seated officers had attacked him, their Kido and Zanpakuto slashes weaving together into a deadly display. At the crucial moment, a black eye had materialized before him, blocking what would have been a fatal blow and giving him the chance to turn the tide. Wait, could it be? His eyes widened with sudden realization. The talisman. Had it been the power of the ritual? His confusion gave way to even greater shock. Now Sojin no longer doubted those earlier words. If a casually produced talisman could determine the outcome of battle, then defeating an Ajuchas wasn't beyond belief. This young man before him was truly frightening. Too bad you weren't there to see the expressions of those cleanup crews. Just as Akira was mid-boast, a white figure entered the hospital room. Kisaragi-kun's strength seems to have increased since our last meeting. A gentle voice rang out as Unohana noticed his Ryatsu fluctuations. Though your injuries seem more severe as well. Captain Unohana. Sojin snapped out of his thoughts and spoke respectfully. Although most of your injuries have healed, you still need 2 days of rest. Unohana nodded in response. Because of your inherently weak constitution, your healing will be slower than others. Hearing this, Sojin's expression turned helpless. Though considered a genius among the nobles with high expectations from his family elders, his weak constitution made him unsuitable for combat. Every injury took far too long to heal. After addressing him, Unohana's gaze returned to Akira. Laceration, penetration, blunt force, sonic waves. She frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "An Ajuchas? Why were you fighting such a hollow?" Clearly, the information about the 32nd district hadn't reached the captain's ears yet. Akira, ever eager to share, launched into another detailed account of his amazing display of power under Unohana's expectant gaze. Hellish cloud parting, hellish darkness severance, my death sword style. It was clear that Unohana and Sojin had focused on entirely different aspects of the story. Kisaragi-kun, you're truly a rare prodigy in Zanjutsu. I demonstrated these 2 techniques only once during our last class. Yet you've not only mastered them completely, but adapted them to your own style. That is, from just a brief description, she had grasped the key points, analyzed the details, and found the answer she sought. Her gaze toward the young man on the bed grew more intense. Noticing her changed expression, Akira's mouth twitched, his eyelids fluttering uncontrollably. The scene felt uncomfortably familiar. Sojin didn't understand what was happening, but he watched as the vitality drained from the young man beside him, leaving behind a dejection reminiscent of dried fish. His eyes had lost their spark, as if he'd surrendered all will to live. Was there some hidden meaning in their exchange? The innocent Kachiki felt the world was moving too swiftly for his understanding to keep pace. Unohana sat beside the hospital bed, leaning close to Akira's bandage-wrapped body. Her fair hands glowed with emerald light as she pressed them gently against his chest. As with the previous treatment, her hands moved across his body, the cool sensation touching his wounds and bringing waves of numbing comfort. After completing the treatment, she leaned in and whispered in his ear, "There are even more powerful techniques in the Death Sword style. If you wish to learn them, I'll be waiting at the 4th Division dojo." Having stated the time and place, Unohana departed the room with grace. By now, the shock had vanished from Sojin's face, replaced by admiration and respect. So this was the nature of his relationship with Captain Unohana. Meanwhile, on the hospital bed beside him, Akira lay with lifeless eyes, looking utterly broken. The moonlight flowed like water, clear and pure. Even in the dead of night, the 4th Division's barracks, the busiest support division, teemed with activity. Bandaged patients wandered about like mummies, mixing with the constant stream of people coming and going. Therefore, Akira's figure didn't draw much attention. The pharaoh's mummy would feel naked compared to him, until he walked into the back mountain area of the coordinated relief station, entering a very modest dojo. The next moment, countless eyes fixed on the dojo's main gate, waiting for the inevitable, another victim to emerge. An unwritten rule governed the relief station. No one was permitted to enter the private dojo in the back mountain area. Though no signs marked this prohibition, anyone who dared enter would be ejected swiftly and shamefully. No exceptions. However, after a moment of tense silence, realization dawned on the onlookers, drawing a collective gasp. Hiss! Heavens above, the captain hadn't thrown this kid out. In the simple dojo, a white figure sat cross-legged on the clean wooden floor. Her braid fell forward, swaying gently with her movements, while a bamboo sword lay across her knees, the scene emanating an air of grace. Unlike the usual Unohana they knew, she carried a sharper edge at this moment. Seeing this setup, Akira had the urge to turn tail and run. From previous experience, he knew all too well how terrifying the beautiful woman before him could be. During their previous sword fighting, his danger instinct would go off like a boiling kettle. Sharp warning sounds coming one after another, relentless. This meant Unohana could strike him down at any moment. If her sword style weren't so appealing, he wouldn't have risked his life coming to this dojo so late at night. Come to think of it, could this be considered a moonlit rendezvous? Looking at the scene before him, a rather dangerous thought crossed Akira's mind. "Kisaragi-kun, my intuition tells me." Unohana spoke softly in the silence. "Your current thoughts are quite inappropriate. A senior once told me." His gaze suddenly became determined. "When the moonlight is at its most beautiful, someone who doesn't know how to appreciate it must be lacking in romance." Hearing this, Unohana fell silent, momentarily unable to evaluate the young man's behavior. You can't say he's not studious, as he came to the dojo on time tonight. Yet you can't say he is studious, as he's particularly resistant to joining 4th Division. You can't say he's not afraid of death, as he won't dare approach when her killing intent flows, sensing her next move. Yet you can't say he is afraid of death, as he can't suppress his lecherous nature. He really is an extremely contradictory fellow. "Captain Unohana, where should we start learning?" Akira raised his hand and said, "I've completely mastered cloud parting and darkness severance." Before he could finish speaking, Unohana tossed him the bamboo sword from her knees. "Demonstrate once." He paused for a moment, then grinned. "All right, watch this." Though his injuries hadn't fully healed, demonstrating sword techniques without using Ryatsu posed no challenge. The bamboo sword danced as Akira's movements flowed from measured to swift. Like a bird soaring through the sky, becoming one with the air itself, he executed the two death sword style techniques flawlessly. Through his transitions, he demonstrated not just mastery, but his own unique interpretation of the forms. Swift as the wind, watching the young man's display, Unohana's eyes brightened, as if discovering a rare treasure. Unprecedented, unheard of. 1,000 years ago, she had visited every major dojo in Soul Society, encountering countless so-called geniuses. Those with remarkable comprehension, those born with immense ryatsu, those naturally attuned to zanjutsu, but never had she seen anyone like Akira. After experiencing the sword techniques just once, he could replicate them perfectly and even infuse them with his own understanding. Such talent surpassed even her own. One more time, her gentle voice commanded, brooking no refusal. Akira scratched his head in confusion, but, seeing her insistent expression, complied. What he failed to grasp was that for Unohana, who lived and breathed zanjutsu, watching perfect technique was a transcendent experience. The immersion in the forms, the sensation of the blade's path, these defied simple description. After his third demonstration, her gaze transformed once more, graceful, peaceful, serene. Akira frowned as he studied the beautiful woman before him, inwardly puzzled. Why is she giving off those Zen master vibes right now? I now have a clear understanding of your level, Unohana said, deliberately ignoring the young man's inappropriate gaze, something she had grown accustomed to over time. How to put it? It wasn't offensive. The death sword style is a school I established in my early years. Her expression grew serious. Long ago, I visited every school in Soul Society, exchanging techniques, testing my skills. The death sword style emerged after my first defeat. As she spoke, she grasped the bamboo sword beside her and rose. Her expression turned solemn, killing intent radiating naturally. From this moment, she began demonstrating 2 new moves from her arsenal: Storm Cut, Erasure Kair, and Dragon Strike, Ryu Dejiki. The teaching process proved remarkably simple. With his heart of a god enhancement, Akira's learning speed once again defied Unohana's understanding of genius. However, her graceful movements were truly captivating. The captain's large haori couldn't conceal her elegant figure. When she focused purely on demonstrating sword techniques, her deadly aura subdued. What a mesmerizing sight, Sister Hannah. Akira gave a thumbs up in silent appreciation. Yet a sobering thought struck him. Unohana was earnestly teaching him zanjutsu, and he was learning with equal sincerity. In essence, they had formed a master-disciple relationship, though they maintained their usual forms of address. Wasn't he, then, being rather improper as a disciple? After the late-night teaching session, Akira crept back to his hospital room. He tiptoed to his bed, carefully slipped in, and turned his head, only to see a pair of bright eyes gleamed in the moonlight. In the full moon's glow, he could clearly see the dark circles under Sojin's eyes. Though it might be inappropriate to ask, their eyes met, and embarrassment flickered across his face. But I'm curious, this late at night, was Captain Unohana really just teaching you zanjutsu? Sojin still couldn't get the answer he wanted. Akira's response was dismissive, focused only on discussing the death sword style and his status as a rare genius. Even Unohana's endless praise and attempts to recruit him into 4th Division to inherit her legacy didn't interest Sojin. Seeing the young man's insatiable appetite for gossip, Akira deflected with one last suggestion to ask Unohana for details before turning over to sleep. He had good reason to rest. His energy was depleted. He had eliminated regular hollows, wiped out rebel assassins, faced off against an Ajuchas, undergone Unohana's intensive medical treatment, and trained rigorously in the death sword style until late at night. Author's note: just to be clear, the MC's own Death Slayer style is based on the style above. They are similar but improved. In terms of hardship, even Aizen couldn't compare. I'm incredibly diligent. If everyone had even a third of my dedication, Soul Society would flourish. With that self-satisfied thought, he drifted peacefully to sleep. Sojin lay awake, staring at Akira's back. The tantalizing gossip just beyond his reach felt like ants crawling under his skin. He couldn't sleep, couldn't even find peace. Yet his noble upbringing and good character prevented him from disturbing someone's rest. And so the frail Kachiki, dark circles forming under his eyes, remained sleepless through the night. The night passed without incident. The next morning, Unohana came to the ward to check on both patients. Not following doctor's orders? Insufficient rest will affect your recovery. After a brief examination, she frowned, her tone carrying a hint of disapproval. Being a doctor, she particularly disliked patients who ignored medical advice. Sojin, with dark circles under his eyes, glanced wearily at her, then at the energetic person beside him, and sighed deeply without saying a word. He remained as he had always been, constitutionally weak from birth, healing extremely slowly and needing more time to recuperate. Akira, however, was quite the opposite. Thanks to his unusual spiritual body, his recovery power was astounding. Even the severe penetrating wound from the ajuches had healed 70 to 80% in a short time. Of course, Anohana's medical skills and Kaido techniques played a major role in this. Although he possessed the enhancement of miraculous healing trait in healing techniques, when it came to true medical skill, he couldn't compare to her. In fact, few, if anyone, in all of Soul Society could. After giving some precautions, Unohana hurriedly left. Being captain of 4th Division kept her quite busy. I really envy you. Sojin watched as Akira moved about the ward, letting out a heavy sigh, his handsome face full of melancholy. Such serious injuries, yet you can already move around. You'll probably leave the hospital in a few days, right? Akira, checking his body's flexibility, replied without turning around. That depends on Captain Anohana's opinion. Though personally, I feel I could leave today if needed. At these words, Sojin's expression grew even more dejected. His recovery speed was worse than ordinary Shinigami, let alone a monster like this priest. They were in completely different leagues. If only I could be like you, he said, envy plain in his eyes. Sigh. Akira suddenly turned around. I almost forgot. You set me up this time. Shouldn't young Master Kachiki offer some compensation? Sojin looked completely puzzled, not understanding his meaning. Seeing this, Akira sighed. You used the talisman, right? The much more rich guy nodded. The tide of war was turned, wasn't it? Sojin's pupils contracted. Regarding the war between the Kachiki family, 6th Division, and the rebels, only a few captains in the Godai 13 knew about it. It was absolutely confidential. How did this guy know? Could there be a traitor among them? His heart clenched with worry for his father and other relatives still on the battlefield. However, Akira's next words immediately dispelled these concerns. The rebel assassins appeared because a traitor in the Shino Academy revealed the source of the talisman. Meaning me. Even though they were just small fry, you, young Master Kachiki, should offer some explanation, right? He stared intently, waiting for a response. For just one talisman, this young super blaster rich noble could produce 100,000 Laotian kips. Surely such a serious incident deserved compensation? Sojin deeply furrowed his brow. He hadn't anticipated the rebels would target the priest who sold him the talisman, and its effectiveness had been truly astonishing. From this perspective, Akira wasn't just his savior, but the savior of the entire Kachiki family. After lengthy consideration, he raised his head, met Akira's expectant gaze, and said seriously, How about, you join the Kachiki clan? Akira, the rebel forces in Soul Society aren't rebels in the literal sense. They're more accurately conflicts of interest between various factions. Sojin explained, they dare to assassinate so recklessly because you lack background. If you join the Kachiki clan, those people would be more cautious. Akira snorted, and then get dragged into your noble's dirty power struggles? Become a blade to deal with other factions. Sojin was stunned, never expecting such insight from this seemingly carefree young man. Don't misunderstand. I would never let you get involved in any of that, he explained earnestly. Just one talisman has helped me immensely, even saving my life multiple times. I swear on the Kachiki name, I would never let a benefactor. Akira raised his hand, cutting off the words with a sigh. You sucker. Ahem, I mean young Master Kachiki, I know you're a good person. But consider this. If even your father, Jinrei Kachiki, can't fully control the clan, how could you, merely an heir, guarantee anything? Sojin fell silent. Though bluntly put, the seemingly carefree Akira understood these matters even more deeply than him. Besides, this concerns my future career and prospects. Akira patted Sojin's shoulder, rubbed his fingers together, and lowered his voice. Do you know what the Shohoin clan offered to recruit me? 2 petite and cute girls, 1 dark and 1 fair. And you think these few words will make me pledge my life to the Kachiki clan? Author's note. MC's a menace. Sojin suddenly realized he had been silent more times today than in the past year. Perhaps even longer. He He had initially thought Akira was carefree and thoughtless, but the man's perspective on matters proved far more astute than his own. Despite living in the Rukongai, he showed remarkable familiarity with the nobles' underhanded dealings. Yet just when Sojin thought they were having a serious discussion, one mention of the Shohoin family's offer completely shattered his defenses. Raise the price. How could he possibly do that? The Shohoin clan had already offered their future head as a candidate, and it was essentially a 2-for-1 deal. He tried to consider every eligible woman in the entire clan, then glanced at Akira, who had begun training intensively and immediately abandoned the futile idea. None of them could compare to having Yoruchi. Even if they were all willing, Akira would certainly refuse. Well, best to let things take their natural course. Now that they had backing, those troublemakers would likely show more restraint. Having temporarily set aside Sojin's worrisome thoughts, Akira focused on his self-training. The battle with the Ajuchas had revealed major shortcomings in his abilities. While he possessed trump cards against strong enemies, they required preparation time. Offering prayers to the deity wasn't as simple as speaking words. Without a proper medium for communication, and his current level of faith in Mimahagi, he'd likely receive no response. Not every dangerous encounter would have Aizen nearby to assist and draw attention. Currently, he had few options to become stronger, though they were all effective. Inscribing the Kido pattern for Shikaho, Heido number 31, and training to increase Ryatsu. The former offered quick results but carried risks, while the latter was safer but slower. Akira decided to pursue both approaches. After bidding farewell to his wealthy roommate, he eagerly left the hospital room with a carefree attitude unbefitting a proper patient. Watching this scene, Sojin's mood grew even more melancholic. Though his injuries were less severe than this guy's, his discharge date would likely be delayed considerably. Unohana's private training ground. Practice makes perfect. While Unohana was busy elsewhere, Akira had already made himself at home in her cottage. The spacious grounds and quiet environment were perfect for intensive solo training. Drawing from his previous 2 attempts, inscribing the Shikaho Kido pattern went much more smoothly this time. Scorching heat spread across his skin, turning it brilliant red as if painted with blood. The burning sensation erupted from within, coursing throughout his body like being roasted in a furnace, evaporating every drop of moisture. As the inscription process continued, his body temperature rose rapidly, soon breaking through the limits that ordinary Shinigami could endure. The surrounding air became distorted, making Akira, who sat cross-legged in the center, appear almost abstract. The difficulty of inscribing the Shikaho pattern was clearly several times higher than that of Byakurai. Beyond the complex patterns, there was another crucial reason. As the Heido number 31 patterns were completed, they conflicted with the Heido number 4. Their incompatible properties would take time to polish for perfect integration. Akira now seemed to be in the depths of Hell's furnace. Flames surrounded him in a sphere, enveloping him completely, wildly burning everything around. His strong will once again proved useful. Compared to his childhood in the Sakahon district, this level of hardship remained bearable. Time passed bit by bit. In the distorted figure, black patterns mysteriously appeared, crawling and meandering across his skin, adding an eerie quality to his appearance. Unaware of this, Akira kept his eyes tightly shut, focusing entirely on inscribing the Kido pattern. When the final stroke was complete, his eyes suddenly opened. A fiery mark flashed across his pupils and vanished. The intense flames around his body instantly receded, leaving a new mark on the ring finger of his left hand. Success! Compared to before, Akira clearly sensed the changes in his spiritual body, his already robust constitution reaching new heights. Now, even without using prayers, he could face the Ajuchas with more dignity. His lack of Riryoku meant he couldn't sustain a prolonged fight. He could battle, but only briefly. To fight equally with this type of Minos Grande, or to defeat it directly, he would need to focus on strengthening his Ryatsu. With this in mind, he shook the remaining ashes from his clothes and changed into a fresh academy uniform. While he didn't own much, clothes weren't a problem. His daily check-in rewards consistently provided Godei 13 or Shino Academy uniforms, sometimes even including women's styles. Speaking of check-ins, Akira suddenly remembered that Sojin's interruption had made him forget today's check-in. He casually activated the daily draw. 3 seconds later, a blinding light forced his eyes shut, obscuring his vision completely. Wow, a golden legend. A bold voice seemed to echo from all directions. The dramatic display filled him with eager anticipation. What would it be? Star Platinum? The world? Or perhaps the Aura Rush? No one can resist the temptation of ORA. No one. The reward appeared. Obtained Hakuda level +5. Hakuda level increased. Currently at level 28. Having killed the Ajuchas barehanded earlier, he had gained new insight into Hakuda, advancing from LV22 to LV23. These additional 5 levels pushed him straight to LV28. New Hakuda knowledge flooded his mind like waves, seamlessly integrating into his being. Well, something is better than nothing. Akira sighed, his expectations deflating as he prepared for another training session. The Hakuda improvement wasn't worthless. These occasional lucky draws were simply the universe balancing out his accumulated misfortune. Someone once said that life is just a series of downs after downs after downs. After downs times n. Fortunately, Akira's life wasn't quite that bleak. Though the Kido pattern inscription had aggravated his injuries somewhat, it had also enhanced his spiritual body's quality. Therefore, minor injuries weren't going to stop him. His training would continue at full intensity. The thought of Aizen studying at the Shino Academy while he recovered from his wounds made his chest tighten with urgency. With this resolve burning in his mind, he dove straight into training. Meanwhile, in East Rakongai, District 32, the wilderness forest lay ravaged from battle. Research Institute personnel and the 2nd Division were conducting detailed investigations, trying to determine why the Hollow had managed to intrude into Soul Society. To their south, several waves of light blurred with the air. Hidden within, watchful eyes observed the scene as Ryatsu steadily built. And even further south, another figure shrouded in similar light waves stood watching, their calm brown eyes fixed on the blurred shapes ahead. Killing intent saturated the air. Coordinates West 3604, North 6273. Abnormal Racier flow detected. The researchers surveyed the area around the shattered mountain, documenting the remaining traces. Hollow Realm Racier components detected, confirming the Ajuchas class Hollow group originated from Hueco Mundo. Residual Ryatsu detected from Captain Shinji Hirako, the Hollow group, Rebel Force assassins, and first-year Shino Academy student Akari Kisaragi. Did that student Sosuke Aizen not participate in the fight? He was likely paralyzed by the sudden appearance of the assassin and Hollow. This crisis was far beyond what Academy students could handle. It's miraculous that those two survived at all. We can't expect every Academy student to be a genius. As the crowd exchanged observations and findings, they pieced together the truth behind the Hollow's appearance in Soul Society. However, just as they neared a breakthrough, the air rippled suddenly, waves of distortion spreading outward. Several black-clad figures materialized nearby. A massive Kido barrier formed with lightning speed, trapping everyone within its semicircle. Who goes there? The researchers broke from their discussion with cries of alarm. The protective Shinigami sprang into combat stance, drawing their Zanpakuto and releasing Ryatsu as they leveled their blades. Kill them all. The voice was hoarse and deliberately disguised, masking any identifying features. At the command, the black figures unleashed overwhelming Ryatsu and began their merciless slaughter. Though the Shinigami present ranged from lower to upper-seated officer level, they stood no chance against these elite attackers. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Someone attempted to breach the barrier with Hado to alert the Siriidii, but after several failed attempts, their face fell in despair. This attack was clearly premeditated. The assailants had calculated the power difference and eliminated all variables. Their victims had no path to victory. Only death awaited. The 12th and 2nd Division members, terror evident on their faces, gripped their Zanpakuto and formed a defensive circle, backs together, trying to steady their nerves. The black figures granted them no time to strategize. Their swift blade work cut down several more 2nd Division members. As Shinigami protecting the researchers at the scene, they had fulfilled their duty to the utmost. And true to their villainous nature, the black figures adhered to the principle that excessive talk leads to death. After their leader's initial command, they maintained complete silence. The aura of slaughter intensified. Blood permeated the air, painting their vision crimson. The Shikaho erupted with devastating force, its crimson energy radiating waves of intense heat through the air. The destructive Kido spell reached its full potential. its searing flames expanding outward in a terrifying display of power, reducing everything in its path to ashes. The black figure leader watched the scene with cold calculation, executing that person's orders to eliminate all evidence. Everything proceeded according to plan, until a familiar, distorted light appeared in their field of vision. The black figure leader's pupils constricted as he instinctively cried out, "Behind someone's." Before he could complete his warning, brilliant blade light erupted across the battlefield, followed by an even more dazzling flower. None knew that light's signature better than he did. Bakudo number 26, Kyako Bent Light. Moments ago, they had used Kyako's concealment to ambush these Shinigami. Unlike them, who lost the concealment effect when attacking, this new figure maintained the Bakudo while fighting. This mysterious combatant displayed exceptional zanjutsu, his blade moving with flawless precision as he methodically eliminated the opponents. His seemingly simple movements concealed sophisticated techniques that enabled efficient, deadly strikes. Every strike was lethal, delivered with fluid grace and tactical mastery that revealed expertise beyond ordinary ranks, suggesting at least upper-seated officer-level capabilities. Crush them. The black figure leader, recognizing the power disparity, barked new orders before losing a third member. His roar snapped the black figures to attention. They burst into Shuanpa, surrounding the Kyako-shrouded figure from all sides. Their combined Ryatsu made the air dense and oppressive. No matter who you are, the black figure leader's voice grated like stone on sandpaper. Appearing here has only one outcome: death. At his command, the black figures struck at the figure in their formation's center from multiple angles. In the next instant, blood sprayed through the air. Behind the Hanya mask, disbelief crossed the face of one of the black figures as searing chest pain consumed his sanity. Author's note: a Hanya mask is a traditional Japanese theatrical mask representing a jealous female demon or serpent, characterized by horns, metallic eyes, and a leering mouth. How is this possible? In his final moments, he saw the true face hidden beneath Kyako. Those brown eyes held a stillness like undisturbed water, as if nothing in this world could stir even the faintest emotion within them. Blood and bubbles filled his throat, stealing his voice before he could warn his companions. How wildly Kamaitachi! Seeing the crushing formation fail, the black figure leader instantly released his Zanpakuto. Brilliant white light erupted from the blade. The light faded to reveal a curved, sharp scythe. Without hesitation, he swung it downward, unleashing fierce winds that howled through the air with piercing shrieks, surging toward his opponent. The winds of Kamaitachi bristled with countless tiny blades of light. Anything caught within would be shredded to pieces. Yet facing this approaching tempest, the blurred figure stood unmoved, simply raising their left hand with one finger extended at the final moment. Heido number 63, Raikoho Thunder Roar Seer. As the words rang out, the black figure leader's pupils contracted in horror. The howling defensive winds vanished, replaced by searing lightning that tore through everything in its path. A brilliant golden burst illuminated the battlefield in an instant. Fierce arcs of lightning twisted skyward, revealing faces frozen in utter shock. In the next moment, the lightning condensed into an overwhelming pillar of light, devouring everything in its path with unstoppable force. A magnificent thunderbolt descended, consuming everything in its path. Hurricane winds, sickles of air, and black shadows vanished in an instant, before they could even scream. All that remained was a charred, unrecognizable corpse lying silently in the lightning-carved crater. The shadows froze, unable to process what they'd witnessed. Their leader, their strongest warrior, had been obliterated by a single incantation-less Heido. The sheer power gap left everyone present in despair. As they came to their senses, they turned to flee. But they were too slow, having dispatched their most formidable member in spectacular fashion, drawing all eyes to himself. The figure shrouded in curved light reversed his Zanpakuto, pointing its tip downward as rippling waves of light danced along the blade. In that instant, all movement ceased. Even the air seemed to stagnate, as if time itself had stopped. Shatter, Kyokasuajetsu the calm, serene voice echoed across the empty battlefield. Even the flames at the edges faltered, their dance gradually diminishing. In the silence, a crisp shattering sound rang out. The next moment, as clarity returned to their eyes, they instinctively drew their Zanpakuto and turned on the shadows beside them. Blood gushed forth, pooling into rivers that covered the scorched earth. At some point, That figure had withdrawn to the battlefield's edge, his brown eyes calmly observing the mutual slaughter as if it were a distant spectacle. Rebels, nobles, prophets, power. Aizen mused with indifference. Is this the true nature of Soul Society? How filthy indeed. Though that guy doesn't seem particularly clever, he sees through this more clearly than anyone else. I suppose that's what you'd call intuition. The battle intensified until all perceived enemies lay dead. Only then did the survivors snap from their daze, staring in horror at what lay before them. Several black-clothed figures lay scattered across the ground, their bodies carved by countless blade strikes until they were nearly pulverized. Blood pooled beneath them, turning the scorched earth crimson. Did we do all this? How is this possible? I'm just a researcher. Don't look at me. I can't even cast Hado number 10. In their shock, the group quickly compared stories and reached a startling conclusion. In matters of life and death, terror unleashes extraordinary power. This primal fear had awakened their latent abilities, enabling them to overcome the assassins who had ambushed them. Was I always this strong? One researcher stared at his blood-covered hands, dumbfounded. Why are we wasting time with research then? I'm joining the 11th Division and heading to the front lines. Count me in. Let's all go. The survivors, intoxicated by their victory, shouted with wild enthusiasm. Having been too weak to qualify for the Godii 13's official ranks, they had resigned themselves to conducting basic experimental research at the Shino Academy. Now, with their newfound potential revealed, they naturally yearned for a grander future. After a brief discussion, they unanimously decided to report to the 11th Division the next day. Aizen remained indifferent to whatever consequences his Kyokusuigetsu might bring. Whether these people lived or died meant nothing to him. Beyond refining and developing Kido patterns, he had another pressing matter to address. Coordinated Relief Station, Room 3. What did you say? Akira's eyes widened. The Academy has final exams? Having anticipated this reaction, Aizen's expression remained perfectly calm, as if the matter didn't concern him at all. Well, isn't this common knowledge? Sojin smiled awkwardly from the adjacent bed. Didn't Kara-sensei tell you all? No, definitely not. Akira shook his head vigorously, having no recollection whatsoever. It was explained in the first class. Aizen stated flatly, you and I received full marks in practical training for participating in 2 missions, though I didn't contribute much in either case. Akira's eyes grew even wider, like brass bells. I know what you're thinking. I've already prepared all the material you might need for the final exam. You just need to memorize it to pass. The most hard-working priest in all of Siriidii immediately broke into a smile, declaring Aizen his best friend. Then, Aizen placed a stack of books 20 centimeters high onto the hospital bed. Seeing this, Akira's smile froze, and his voice trembled. This much? This is just the table of contents. The actual material is over there. Aizen pointed out the window at books stacked into a small mountain, nearly filling the corridor. 3 histories of Soul Society, origins of the 13 divisions, the nature of hollows, spirit body structure and analysis, soul burial and purification. Akira stared in shock at the familiar face before him, silently listening as he listed book titles for nearly a minute. These are just the basic theories. Aizen sighed. I've simplified it as much as possible for you. If you can't even remember these, you'll have to give up on the exam. What about you? I've naturally memorized them all. Aizen was exasperated. With Akira's talent, he could master this knowledge with just a little time. Yet this guy would rather practice sword strikes under a waterfall with weights than memorize a single character. In his own words, memorizing these things wouldn't make him stronger. So what was the point? Brain capacity was limited, and he needed to allocate his mental space efficiently. Only then could he stand at the pinnacle. Author's note: in this case, I agree. If Kenpachi Zaraki had to pass through the academy and final exams to be recognized as a Shinigami, it would be ridiculous. Though, Aizen couldn't understand why a student who hadn't even graduated suddenly had such lofty ambitions. Seeing his determination, however, he couldn't say much more and had to let him be. Damn it, Akira raged, having the answers in your head. Isn't that the same as cheating? Why not compete fair and square with luck? As his words fell, the hospital room went silent. The two stared at the enraged youth with strange expressions, momentarily at a loss for words. After a moment of silence, the the good-natured Sojin tried to persuade him. Actually, first years don't need to memorize that much, and there's still time before finals. You just need to. After Sojin's lengthy explanation, Akira tried to calm himself and begin memorizing from the table of contents. But his resolve crumbled quickly. Despite the text being simplified to its bare essentials, the mere thought of memorizing what he deemed useless information made his head pound. In his mind, it would contribute nothing to his future. So instead, Akira set aside the books and retrieved incense, ritual wands, offerings, and other ceremonial items from beneath his hospital bed. Under the bewildered stares of his companions, he began his ritual. Has he always been like this? Sojin asked with clear skepticism. Aizen's eyes flickered with resignation as he nodded. True to form, there were no surprises. When faced with the choice between studying and cheating, this guy opted for rituals.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.